Hello. Welcome back to more Higurashi. I'm just gonna post the link in various places. And here. Okay. Hello to whoever's here. I see that there's already a like, so. Hi, Daisy. So, let's do our recap. Last time, we went to go see Satoko at school after having tried to... Well, she came to school after we tried to get the teacher, Chie, to help us, and she contacted the child welfare place. Unfortunately, it didn't seem to go very well, because the next day, Satoko seemed fine at first, but then when we tried to comfort her, she kind of broke down into some sort of panic attack. And basically Keiichi snapped and decided that enough was enough. He saw no other option. He was going to murder Satoko's uncle to free her from her abuse. And we'll see how that continues today. So let's go ahead and get started. Load. I don't know if I'm going to finish the chapter today. The problem is I have plans for tomorrow, and I don't know how long the rest of the chapter is, because it's four more chapters. Sorry, I don't know how long the rest of Tatarigoroshi is, because it's 4 more chapters, and I've been doing 2 per stream. I could do a long stream, but the problem is, like I said, I have plans tomorrow. I don't want to be super tired in the morning. This may take 2 more streams. Either way, I plan to stream this again on Sunday, so in 2 days. So I'll either finish it today and start the next arc then, or we'll finish it then. Either way, it shouldn't be too long before we're done with it. So yeah, let's continue. Mion and the others, having to set up for the Watanagashi festival or something. Mion and the others, having to set up for the Watanagashi festival or something, invited me along, but I refused. Of course I did. How could they be taking it easy and setting up for a festival in this situation? Mion had a lot of nerve. The first thing I did when I got back was take a shower. Not because I wanted to wash off sweat. It was because I wanted to be even calmer. I already understood this, but killing that man would be so very easy. The really hard thing would be not getting arrested for it, so we could get our peaceful days back. As I thought about it, I realized it wasn't easy. Japan's police force have the highest arrest rate in the world, that's true. I would need to deceitfully pull off the perfect crime, and it couldn't be a half-hearted attempt. Still, it wasn't 100%. Even the best police force in the world couldn't have a 100% arrest rate. Arrest rate does not equal good. It's like well known that Japan's police are pretty corrupt, and like, if you're suspected, you're pretty much screwed. As far as I know, but yeah. I've read a lot of articles on trials with people brought up on false charges. At court, they consider whether the charges are false or not, but figuring out the real criminal is entirely out of scope, and that meant perfect crimes did exist. In fact, perfect crimes are sort of like works of art. They could even be respected and revered. You just had to look at the inundation of mystery novels everywhere throughout history. They dealt with all sorts of difficult-to-solve incidents involving secret rooms and alibis and stuff, but they all wanted to show one thing. They wanted to show the beauty of a perfect crime. There was something divine in the flawlessness of the word perfect. Yes, perfect crimes were skills of the gods. And in that sense, the serial freak deaths they were calling the Curse of Oyashiro-sama, I understood. They must have been the works of gods. Each one appeared to have been resolved, but they couldn't stop it from happening every year. Yeah, skills belonging only to gods. Those are perfect crimes. and I would be setting up my own crime before Oyashiro-sama's series of perfect crimes 4 years in the running. If I were to put it boldly, I was challenging a god. Foolhardiness would be needed to make the decision, but I needed to be calm, cool, colder than ice to put that plan together. Kill him like a flame, but as systematic as ice. Starting now, I need to retain both of those ideas within me. Modeling my crime after a mystery novel wasn't actually a bad thing to focus on. Sometimes, kidnappings involving disturbing, original methods that made it into the newspaper were used as a basis for novels after the person was arrested. Stuff like that made it into the news. Day and night, for a very long time, mystery novel authors polished and refined their most fantastic, artistic crimes. Imitating that could be a shortcut to planning the perfect crime in a short period of time. Of course, I haven't read enough mystery novels to act all high and mighty about them. The one who really liked mystery novels was my mom. She'd read every well-known mystery novel from overseas, from past and present. Every time she watched mystery shows, she would always criticize them as having cheap tricks or being poorly thought out. I wonder what the perfect crime would mean to her. What do I think the most well-done perfect crime in all the mystery novels I've read is? Yeah. Well, you've read quite a lot of them, right? I figure you might know a lot about them. It's more fun to read than to find out. If I told you all the tricks right off the bat, they'd be no fun anymore. It wasn't like I was asking for my own amusement. She was deflecting the question, so I would somehow butter her up first and draw out an answer. Of course, well-done mystery novels. Yeah. She probably is a Motoshiro fan. They all have a unique charm to them, so it's hard to say which is the most interesting. You'd really have to force me to pick one. I didn't want to know which novels you liked. I wanted to know about the trick that made you the most surprised. If it was really a perfect trick, the detectives wouldn't be able to solve the case, though. That was true, and there'd be no point. Mystery novels are enjoyable because of the process of the mysteries getting solved. If it was unsolvable, it wouldn't make a very good topic for a novel. I get it. Yeah, you're right. If the main character can't solve it, it wouldn't be much of a story, huh? Was I being too simplistic? A mystery novel was basically a game. They were written so that you can get to the goals, so that you could solve them. But I couldn't use something so optimistic. It needed to be the be-all, end-all of tricks that we could, without a doubt, return to our old lives. By the way, Keiichi, do you understand that truly perfect crimes don't even become stories? Mom looked at me intellectually and grinned impishly. I'd never gotten to read it, but apparently one time a long time ago, Mom had written her own mystery novel and submitted it for some mystery novel award. Apparently she was really into it. Don't even become stories. What does that mean? Keiichi, what are the essential parts of a story? I've never seen Motoshiro. I've seen like a couple videos about it, but I don't actually know that much. A beginning, a middle, and an end? Correct. The beginning, of course, is especially important. If there is no beginning, then the story never starts. Well, yeah. If nothing happened, nothing would begin. Right. Nothing happened, so there wouldn't even be an incident. Detectives wouldn't be called, so there wouldn't be any mystery. There would be no mystery, so there would be no solution. In other words, it would be the ultimate perfect crime. Wait a second. Could you explain that again? My mom just told me something absurd. And she was saying it so smoothly too, so I kind of tuned her out, but she said something extremely important just now. It's not really that difficult to understand. The incident just has to never come to light, that's all. Just has to never come to light. For example, how about this? Say there's an old man living deep in a forest nobody goes into. Uh-huh. And one day the old man gets killed by an axe. And let's say the criminal was the old man's son. He went to the old man's house and they were drinking together, but they got into a fight and he killed him. What an extremely cheap plot. It was an impulsive crime without a bit of planning. was pretty far from a perfect crime.
でも
But
ケイチ
Keiichi,
そこ
the
は
house is
地元でも
really,
深い
really deep in
森
this
の中の
forest.
一軒家なの。普段は
So
絶
deep in the
対
mountains
に
that
誰も
nobody would
訪
ever
れ
go
ない
out that far.
深い山奥の深い深い森の中。
Well, that's the other thing, yeah. If it's literally unsolvable, then you can't... The story is solving it, so yeah. You're right. But Keiichi's asking in a roundabout way for tips on how to murder Teppei without... and get away with it. So deep in the mountains that nobody would ever go out that far. Then his son would go back to town and say that the old man was doing fine. What about that as a perfect crime? Keiichi, this incident would only begin when it was found out that the old man was killed. If nobody ever visited the old man's house after that, that beginning would never occur. The beginning would never occur. So basically, the story wouldn't start. The incident wouldn't come to light, and they wouldn't call in detectives. And nobody would be suspicious in the first place, so there'd be no mystery. They'd think the old man was still living by himself deep in the forest. And the old man's face would appear in the sky, and that would be it. Something like that, you know? That's amazing. That's a pretty great trick. But it wouldn't be a novel. Mystery novels are for entertainment, after all. Higurashi immediately get arrested. They can't be instruction manuals for perfect crimes. I was trying hard to talk cheerfully to fool her, but inside I was excited. Special tools, strange geography, mysterious drugs, traps involving huge sums of cash. None of them were needed for perfect crimes. The important thing was that there wasn't a beginning. As long as the incident didn't come to light, it would be fine. Speaking broadly, if I could kill him without anyone finding out, and dispose of the corpse somewhere no one could find, it would basically already be a perfect crime. Of course, if someone up and vanished one day all of a sudden, people would get suspicious. But that didn't apply to this man. Last year, after their aunt died, he ran away from the village in fear of Oyashiro-sama. When the night of Watanagashi came around again, everyone would have to think that he ran away in fear again. I mean, he had been living with a lover of his in town. No matter what it felt like when he vanished, no one would be suspicious. People hated him, after all. No one would care where he went if he disappeared. When I thought about it like that, it got easier and easier to imagine killing him. There was no point in thinking inside my house anymore. I left, getting my bike out of the garage. For now, it didn't matter where I was going. I just rode through the wind, trying to calm my excitement by feeling the cool air on my body. Where I'd kill him, how I'd do it, what time, and how to dispose of the corpse. If I just had those 4 things, I could get a good plan going. I was so surprised at how little there was to decide that I shivered. I'd been completely prepared to build this humongous plan over a really long period of time. But if I could just get these little things in order, I could put it into motion. Today was a Saturday. I would have to kill him on the night of Watanagashi. So long as I was standing in for Oyashiro-sama, I only had 24 hours remaining. That too, people would be like, oh, it was Oyashiro-sama's kiss. Satoko, just hang on for 24 more hours. I can't even imagine having to suffer through even more, but please hold out for a little longer. I know you can't even last another second, I know that. But please just hold out. Your Nini will save you for sure. Outside, it was still early enough for the cicadas to be crying. Early afternoon. Evening was still a long way off. I looked at the sky. At some point, it had gotten cloudy. Come to think of it, as I left the house, I heard on the TV that the weather forecast was calling for a chance of rain on Sunday. The sky was the color of lead. If I heard a little bit of thunder, I'd definitely have expected a sudden evening shower. My first destination was school. Before explaining why I was going there, I needed to explain what method for killing that man I had decided upon. I decided that the most suitable death, the one I needed to give him, was the same as last year's curse, the same as the punishment their aunt had received, being beaten to death. Wouldn't beating him to death be somewhat unreliable? You may think that stabbing him with a blade would be more reliable, but this was something I had chosen after a lot of thought. You just needed to think realistically. The law, it prohibited carrying any blades longer than 10 centimeters, I think. So the blades available to me even the longest ones, were still limited to things shorter than a ruler. You can probably understand how tricky it would be with such a short reach to go up against an opponent that might fight back. In that case, a weapon with more reach, like a staff, would be far more advantageous. It might not be quite as inherently lethal, but since you could just keep hitting the guy until you killed him, the end result was the same. So what's a staff-like deadly weapon, terrifyingly powerful, and also eminently portable? By this point, you should immediately think of a metal baseball bat. I don't need to explain how terrifying a metal baseball bat can be as a weapon. Of special note is the fact that you can carry one around in broad daylight and not be thought of as suspicious. Don't they try to find excuses to find people because the crime rate is so low? In Japan, I think I've heard about that, yeah. Just those two... Also, hi, Serena. Just those 2 points would have been enough to choose a metal bat for my weapon. But there was one more reason for choosing a metal bat in particular. I will speak about it later. After school that Saturday, my classmates were still having fun playing in the schoolyard. I could show up there and it would be the same as always, so nobody will think I'm suspicious. Getting my hands on the weapon without looking suspicious was actually a factor I couldn't ignore. I didn't normally play baseball, so if I went to a sports store looking for a metal bat, it would definitely be suspicious. Thanks, Serena. I can't let there be a beginning to the story, so I needed to be really careful even about that. That left school. At a location at which my appearance wouldn't be suspicious, I would acquire the weapon. I checked inside the classroom through the window, but of course there was nobody there. The only students who would stay in there were me and the others when doing club activities. Without us, the classroom after school was just an empty, unused room. Without glancing around nervously, as if I'd just gone to get something I'd forgotten, I casually went in the entrance. Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious. Yeah. It looked like the teacher was busy with paperwork in the teacher's lounge. I didn't see her in the hallway. Naturally, yet quickly as a shadow, I entered the classroom. The empty room was full of a strange, stagnant air that you couldn't feel normally. An empty classroom with nobody here. Maybe while no one was around, the desks creep about of their own accord, licking the floors clean of dirt. If I suddenly stepped into a place like that, would the desks, in their surprise, fly at me, crush my bones, and eat me alive? That's ridiculous. I felt regret at wasting valuable thinking time on stupid delusions. The students' lockers were lined up in the back of the classroom. The one I was looking for wasn't my own. It was a forbidden locker, one I had accidentally discovered one day. Here it is. Hojo. This has to be it. If one person has one locker, then why would only Satoko have two? I'd made a fuss about it once. After that, I learned it was Satoshi's locker, and he had the same last name as her. But of course, even though it was a locker for a student no longer here, looking inside it was still a shameless act. Wait, did it... But one time, I let my curiosity get the better of me and took a peek inside. Inside, it was average and worthless. At the time, I hadn't been interested, so until now I'd forgotten what had been in it. But now that I had, dare I say it, awakened, I remembered the thing that had been there. I opened the locker, and a stench of mold and sweat wafted out like a gym storehouse that hadn't been cleaned in weeks. My face puckered up at the stench, but I looked for it. Yes, Satoshi was on Coach's baseball team. Inside the locker was a Hinamizawa fighter's uniform. And it. The one Satoshi used. The metal bat. Yes. This was the reason I wanted to choose this bat. This murder would be carried out by me, but this wasn't originally my role. It was Satoshi's. But I would stand in for him and call myself Satoko's Nini. It was one of the rules for standing in for him. I reached for the metal bat and grasped it firmly. It was light, and yet its tip had enough heft in it, enough to easily imagine the horror if I brought it down with all my might. Satoshi, I'll give you one last chance to save your sister. Lend me your strength. You're a coward, but I'll stand in for you. Imagine the locker being rigged to explode the moment it was open. So if you still care even a little bit about her, you will lend me your strength. There's no more suitable weapon in the world for putting that man to death than your bat. Now, I just needed to figure out where to hide it. Tomorrow, before the act, I would just stop by the school and grab it. Because I couldn't ignore the possibility someone would see me bringing it home and think it was strange. But if I left it here, there wouldn't be a problem. Plus, tomorrow was Sunday. Not only that, it was the day of the biggest festival in the whole village. Nobody would be coming to school. I left out the entrance and went over to a construction vehicle parked nearby. We'd been warned by our teacher not to touch it just for laughs, so none of the kids would come near the vehicle either. They wouldn't, because if she found out they touched it, they'd be in huge trouble. I quietly hid it in the shadow of the vehicle. The chances of someone operating the vehicle tomorrow were slim to none, because tomorrow was Sunday. Government workers had the day off, and for what my classmates had said, the thing had been left here for years now. Machines that haven't been moved in years. You can't just suddenly start them up again. So I was almost definitively fine in this case. The sunlight was piercingly hot. My head grew faint for a moment. Had the heat been this harsh for the entire day? A moment of dulled thoughts like this was a moment of carelessness. I gave myself a couple hits in the head, then looked around warily. As I walked through the valley of the shadow of doubt. God. Keiichi's gravestone has he shouldn't have opened that locker engraved? I don't know what you mean. Also, it's the Valley of the Shadow of Death, isn't it? Okay. Next, how to dispose of the corpse. Disposing of the corpse. The ultimate way not to create a beginning was to not let the corpse be found. It was even more important than killing him. Oh, Gangsta's Paradise is, as I walk through the valley where I harvest my grain, I take a look at my wife and realize she's very plain. Oh, wait, no, that's Amish. Fuck, yeah, no. I know you're quoting Gangsta's Paradise. I thought you were correcting me and saying the other one. I'm stupid. That one's Amish Paradise. Okay, whatever. Thinking on it vaguely, the first thing that came to mind was the swamp. Onigafuchi, the dreadful bottomless swamp revered even now, that appeared in the legends of Onigafuchi village. Yes, the swamp called Onigafuchi was here first, and then the village took its name to become Onigafuchi village. Oh, I see, right. Yeah. In other words, this swamp was the origin of Onigafuchi village. No one, no matter who it was, would float back to the surface of this bottomless swamp. Everyone would be swallowed down into the land of the demons below the earth. That's how the stories went. If I was trying to copy Oyashiro-sama's curse, then I felt that theory demanded I discard the remains and the weapon into the swamp. But they may have said it's bottomless, but I didn't actually know. And people say large creatures like humans produce a lot of gas when they rot, granting a lot of buoyancy. It was why using fairly heavy objects to hold people down didn't work. Come to think of it, with the curse the year before last, Rika-chan's mother drowned herself in the swamp, and the criminal behind the dismemberment that went missing the year of the first curse too. It was rumored he tried to discard the body in the swamp and accidentally drowned in it. I never heard of the corpse coming back up or them finding it. Then shouldn't I choose to discard the corpse there too? I could discard the weapon there, and then for example if her uncle came out on a motorcycle and attacked, it would be convenient to get rid of the bike too. I knew that Satoko's uncle generally used a motorcycle for transportation, but as for the corpse... After a lot of worrying, I decided not to discard the corpse in the swamp. The drowning, suicide, and accident were both rumors. Nobody knew if they'd actually happened. There were no lack of false rumors about the drowning suicide anyway, and it was possible the murderer hadn't drowned there and was still on the run. That meant no one had ever confirmed a corpse being dropped in there and then not coming back up. Then what would I do with the body? I thought it might be interesting to go with the first incident, cut him to pieces and hide him, but the preparation and work for dismembering a human body would be difficult given the amount of time I had. With that out of the question, I arrived at the conclusion to go with the more orthodox method of burying the body. Then where I would bury it was a question related to where I would kill him. Of course, I wanted to keep my time in proximity to the body at a minimum. With that in mind, I would want to dig the hole to dump the body in beforehand, and to make the location of the act and the hole close together. The choice of where to plan the crime, that I needed to be absolutely careful and thorough with. It had to be somewhere nobody would witness it, and a place with hiding places for a sneak attack. I could dig a hole for the body right there. I go over the possibilities in my head of the various destinations her uncle would head to from Satoko's house. I imagined a map of the area in my head, and then I found a place that fulfilled those conditions so easily it was almost unbelievable. A bit of a back road that went through the woods. I didn't think her uncle would go deeper into the mountains of Yagouchi on a whim. If he was going somewhere, he'd pass through these woods first. Keiichi's a child and he's thinking about how to dismember a human. He needs some help. He's been pushed to his fucking limit, seeing what's going on with Satoko, you know. I think this is a new song. And nobody used this back way unless they had something to do with Satoko's house or one or two other places. This path was fantastically ideal, as few people used it. I would wait for him in these woods. Would an ambush actually be possible? I went to the trees and tried really hiding myself in a few places. It was extremely quiet. My senses could be sharpened here to their maximum amount. I didn't know when he'd come, but I'd wait right here for Satoko's uncle. I actually had some trouble coming to that decision. The question arose of whether I should somehow call the man out. Was there a risk I'd be taking by luring him here? That man made Satoko do all the shopping and errands. He seldom left on his own business. He wouldn't leave, unless I worked out a plan to force him to, would he? That was the question. Tomorrow was the Watanagashi festival. Would he go out for the festival, or would he stay inside? If he stayed inside, how would I drag him out of his house? That's right. Wouldn't he make Satoko go to the festival? Satoko would go to the festival. Meanwhile, I would call the man. This is the Okinomiya police station. We have the young lady from your house. Could you come and pick her up immediately? It didn't even have to be the police. This is the clinic. The young lady from your house has been injured. Please come and pick her up. Yes, that would work too. If I claimed to be the police or the hospital, told him to come, and then hung up on him, he'd rush there trying to figure out what was going on, wouldn't he? Waiting to kill Satoko's uncle while Gen 4 Blissy's health depletes. And just the other day, he was visited by a probation officer. He wouldn't suddenly grumble about having to get his niece and not go. It would look like child neglect. The man had no skills useful around the house. Satoko, his slave, was an essential part of his daily life. Conclusion. If he went out to the festival, I would attack him here on his way there or back. If he didn't, I would lure him out by phone. If luring him out by phone was my first step, I needed to be sure Satoko would go to the festival, leaving the house. It would be convenient if I could make Mion take Satoko to the festival. She said her aunt was a district welfare officer. In other words, an ally to the probation officer. If I somehow incited Mion to take Satoko to the festival with her, well, being who she was, she'd use that fact and get her there. Satoko should just take a break and have fun at the festival with everyone. She should have a good time, reminisce on our former peaceful days, and when she went home, everything would be over. Break in and murder him in front of Satoko, that totally wouldn't go wrong. God. Yeah, that would be the best outcome. With that decided, I needed to dig a hole somewhere in the woods to hide the body, so it wouldn't stand out, so it wouldn't be found. Someplace nobody would see me while I was completely exposed as I buried the corpse. I wanted it to be close to the scene of the crime, but it naturally grew farther away. Deep in the bosom of the Black Forest, the voices of the Higurashi were the only sounds here, informing me that people shouldn't indiscreetly set foot in this place. Digging a hole, huh? Digging a hole with so many tree roots crawling around the ground would be far more difficult than I'd envisioned. I snuck a gardening spade out here in my bag, but that wouldn't be enough. Still, as I looked into various approaches, I managed to find a place I could dig into. Tomorrow I'd bring a real shovel from the storeroom at home. I'd manage with that. I wondered how big a hole would have to be to fit a human all the way into it. I'd probably have to dig pretty deep down. But if I was slipshod in these efforts, I'd let a beginning occur. I absolutely couldn't allow that. Use any amount of time you need to. I mustn't spare any effort to utterly erase him. I glanced at my wristwatch. It was a little past 6. This is probably all I was going to get done here for today. I really wanted to dig the hole in advance tonight, even if it got dark out, but Mom would be upset if I stayed out that late. It wouldn't be good to come off as suspicious to my parents. I needed to go back home and give Mion a call soon. I needed to get her to promise Satoko to take her by tonight. After that, today would be done. Done. Would it be, though? Was this really everything I could do to prepare right now? I decided where to kill him. I decided how to kill him. I decided, of course, how to dispose of the body. I didn't decide on a time, but I would play that by ear. I didn't have a way to decide that. Was that really all? Was this really all right? Have I overlooked anything? Would this really go how I planned? After all this, worry started welling up one after another. It was only natural I'd be anxious. This would be the first and last big job of my lifetime. I could not allow failure, and I had no experience as this was my first time. I didn't have the know-how, the knack, so it was only natural I'd be anxious. The dark clouds of unease told me doing nothing would be the easiest way. A truly pathetic suggestion this late in the game. Have you forgotten how miserable Satoko looked? From the outside, it may have looked like I was resolute, but deep in my heart, my knees were shaking loudly. What are you doing outside? Oh, nothing, just dug a hole, suppose, buddy. I've never actually won a single fight to my satisfaction. Could I really kill someone? I may have been planning an ambush, but my enemy was large and far older than me. He had a scary face, and he looked like he was well accustomed to fighting. Could I have... All the pieces before and after the murder were perfectly planned, but was the actual murder the most important part, what unsettled me the most? All my preparations, all of my perfectly concealed machinations. If I didn't successfully murder him, they amounted to nothing. Damn it! After coming this far, you're pathetic, Keiichi Maebara! If you start to have these kinds of second thoughts, your ulterior motive will be obvious. Let's go home. Go home and calm your mind. Tomorrow will be a juncture in your life, the likes of which graduation, employment, marriage, and childbirth couldn't hold a candle to. A day of murder. To kill someone. For someone else's sake. With that day behind us, we would take it back again. Those mild, spring-like days we never thought would stop. Those safe, peaceful, fun times. I pedaled my bicycle hard to get back home. I felt somehow unsteady. Like my body and soul weren't in alignment. A subtle shift between where the tips of my hands and feet really were and where I felt them to be. My vision was a little distant and narrow, as if the great barrier I risked my future life on had nothing to do with me. An unreal sensation. How could I put it? Everything was so far away. Fine. Feel your unease permeate you, Keiichi Maebara. If that will turn your timidity into meticulousness and allow you to act with greater caution, then it's actually an important emotion to feel. This feeling I had never went away that night. Yeah, first hit should disorient him enough to give him opportunity for follow-up attacks. It was the first time I'd be calling Mion's house. I searched for her in the phone book the school gave me, then dialed a short phone number, the kind unique to remote places. It was around dinner time. She would probably be home, but just as I started to think nobody would respond, someone finally picked up the receiver. Hello, this is Sonozaki. Oh, I'm sorry for calling so late at night. Is this Mion? Huh? May I ask who's calling? It's me, Keiichi. Kei-chan! It's pretty late. What's up? She seemed to be in a weirdly good mood, and she drew her syllables out. Right, it's the night before tomorrow's festival, so she's probably with her family having some drinks. Sorry for the late call. Do you have time right now? Sure. What is it? It's about Satoko. I heard her draw in a small breath on the other end. Satoko. She's in a pretty bad spot. I hope she's okay. The scent of sake had completely disappeared from her voice. She can't be okay. You saw too, didn't you? What she was like? She was completely worn out from all the abuse. We failed her all this time, and now she's become like that. Hey, Casey. We didn't fail her. Everyone tried their hardest to help her. But we didn't come up with anything, and we couldn't save her. In the end, we couldn't do anything about it, and now she's become like that. I guess you're right. All I did was watch, after all. So, well, at least... couldn't we at least let her have fun for one night? Huh? Let her have fun? She's been so battered lately. You understand. That's why. I want you to take her to the Watanagashi festival tomorrow. I don't mind. But why? Why? I want to give her a breather at least for the festival night, you know? Even if it's just one night. If she can get away from her evil uncle, then I think she'll be happy, even if it's only for a little while. Yes, but why? Why? Why what? I was having a little difficulty understanding what Mion was asking me. Why? Well, I mean, why don't you bring her, Kei-chan? Why do you need to ask me to do it? Mion was persistent about odd things. No, maybe it'd be better to say that she was sharp. Well, I actually have something to do tomorrow. I can't make it to the festival. So I wanted you to take Satoko there for me. Something to do? It's nothing major. I'll probably finish quickly, but I might not be able to meet up with you all tomorrow. Hey, Mion, could I leave Satoko to you just for tomorrow night? Mion took a long time to give her reply. I got the feeling that Mion had been acting weird for a while now. Like she was flustered by emotions or something.
Yeah.
No. Huh? Was that a sob? Mion? Are you crying? I said no. I don't want to. I don't want you to push this onto someone like me. I'm not trying to push anything onto you. It's just for tomorrow night. That was a lie! What? Mion, what was she talking about? Saying it's just for the night of Watanagashi. And then it was forever. Liar. But I guess we're even, huh? I couldn't keep the promise I made with you. I left her alone. Alone. All this time. I had no idea what to say to that. Mion was clearly now talking to someone other than me. I didn't know who. All I could do was listen to her in a daze. You never came back after that. And now you called me again to push her onto me. You're so unfair. Hey, you're Satoshi-kun, aren't you? Mion, what are you talking about? When I said her name, whatever spell was on Mion was released. I'm sorry. It's nothing. It's just that I got a phone call a lot like the one you're making now, a long time ago. Was it from Satoshi? Mion didn't answer. All I could hear was sobs coming through the receiver. Sorry. I think I'm still a little tipsy. I got all weirdly emotional. Sorry, I probably scared you. I had no idea how it happened. But I was pretty sure that last year, on this very day, Satoshi had called Mion and told her to bring Satoko to the festival. And when she asked why he needed her to do it, he replied the same way I just did. Satoshi didn't go to the festival, did he? Yeah. He said he had something to do and couldn't make it. And he told me to take Satoko there in his place. At the time, Satoshi said it too, didn't he? That he'd leave Satoko to you. Yeah, he did. Just for tomorrow night. The way you said it was just like how he did. I just got a little upset, caught up in a memory and all. I didn't expect this. Satoshi had given her the exact same phone call 1 year ago today. After that, Mion had said more. That he was lying. That he told her it would only be for the night of the festival. I get it. A few days later, Satoshi, he disappeared. Disappeared might have been a rather vague way to put it. Whether he ran away or not, Satoshi left, abandoning Satoko. Yes. He didn't transfer or run away from home. He disappeared. And then, an idea far more indistinct than even fog crossed my mind. Satoshi made exactly the same phone call as me last year. Why would Satoshi make the exact same call? If, in the truest sense, he really made the exact same phone call as I am right now, then the incident where their aunt was beaten to death, that's... could it... was... Satoshi. Huh? What was that? Last year, Satoko had been constantly abused by her uncle's wife, their aunt, too. Her aunt abused her the most, and on that night, in the name of Oyashiro-sama's curse, she was taken from this world. If I thought about that, everything made perfect sense, didn't it? Last year, Satoko's aunt was beaten to death, wasn't she? Would it be impossible for Satoshi to have... No, but that would mean... But then, Satoshi, he was a coward who abandoned Satoko and ran away, wasn't he? How could Satoshi resolve himself to kill a person to save Satoko? It was unthinkable. I actually considered that as well, though it'd be mean to Satoshi. A few days later, he disappeared, on Satoko's birthday. When I first heard it, I flew into a rage. What a cruel day to have run away on. But, now that I thought about it like this, the story changed completely. Satoshi had probably been even less calm than I was now. He was her big brother, related by blood, watching his little sister be abused day in and day out. Maybe that's why he couldn't keep calm. And that was why the corpse of their aunt, beaten to death, was so easily discovered. Satoshi lost himself in his anger and hadn't hidden the corpse. He permitted a beginning to occur. If the police conducted a full-blown investigation, it was easy to imagine they wouldn't take long to pin down Satoshi as the culprit. Satoshi. He wished for a return to peaceful days with Satoko, and though he achieved it for a time, he had been steadily driven into a corner. And then he wanted to at least hold out until Satoko's birthday, but finally they nailed him. At the time, Satoshi had been carrying the savings he'd amassed to buy Satoko a giant stuffed animal for her birthday present. He would buy the stuffed animal as her gift, and then get caught. Or he could use the money and disappear. That was the choice he had been forced to make, and he decided not to make Satoko the sister of a murderer. If that was the case, then it must have been an unspeakably bitter decision. All that money he'd saved wanting to see Satoko happy, he had to use it to make her sad, and he used the savings and disappeared to Tokyo if the rumors were true. Was that how Satoshi disappeared? I don't know. That Oishi guy seems to think that way, though. Oishi. Had he been slowly driven into a corner by that repulsive man's pig-headed pursuit? The circumstantial evidence is all there, but I think your deduction is wrong. They caught some lowlife somewhere in the prefecture, and he apparently turned himself in for the crime. That was right. The deviant had confessed, and the incident was solved. They said he really was just a crazy person, and that he had no ties to Hinamizawa. And no relationship with Satoshi, of course. I mean, I have a pretty hard time believing the guy would lie in Satoshi's place. You couldn't just arbitrarily decide like that. You never know where or how humans are tied together. If that guy took the blame, then it was the perfect crime. Of course, it was really a perfect crime. Then there would have been no reason for Satoshi to vanish. Plus, I don't think Satoshi had the kind of money to run away. That day he withdrew all his savings.
No matter who I tell this to, nobody believes me, but that stuffed animal he said he was buying for Satoko, it was gone from the display, sold. It must have been Satoshi.
Wait a minute. If he didn't use the money to flee and bought the stuffed animal instead, he would have gone back to Satoko, wouldn't he? It seems unbelievable he'd buy it and then disappear without having given it to her.
Yeah. So, now I don't know what happened. It would be one thing if he had the money, but if he used all his savings on it, he'd be totally broke. You can't live a life on the run without money in this world.
I didn't get it. After all that, I was understanding Satoshi less and less. The two of us fell silent. I couldn't remember how we even got on this topic.
Sorry. I think we got off topic. Satoko, right? Don't worry. I actually already invited her.
Yeah, it could have been on a number of reasons that the guy confessed to it, even if he didn't do it. Huh? You serious?
When everyone went to the shrine to prepare for the festival, we started talking about getting Satoko to the festival itself. So then I used the phone at the assembly hall to invite her. Her uncle was acting distant and didn't seem to care at all, but in any case, we got the okay from him. We decided to all meet up and go together tomorrow. You okay with that? Satoshi?
Stupid. I'm not Satoshi. I was a little relieved. I hadn't needed to make the phone call. Satoko had already been invited to the festival, and not in a way that smelled of blood, a way to leave her uncle alone to create time for me to kill him. They purely wanted Satoko to enjoy herself, so they invited her. In the end, it was the same, but I was happy for that slight difference. Sorry. I guess I didn't need to call then. First yesterday, now today. Sorry for, saying such weird things. Just forget about it.
No, I'm the one who should apologize. Losing it like that isn't like me. I'm really sorry.
We apologized to each other for a little bit. Alright, I'll be going now. Good night.
What did you have to do?
As if interrupting our parting words, Mion struck straight where it hurt.
Or is it like with Satoshi, where you can't say?
Stupid. I keep telling you, I'm not Satoshi.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that.
I deflected her, with a response that wasn't really an answer. Mion didn't hound me anymore after that. Alright, this time for real. Good night.
I don't know why you're giving me the same phone call as Satoshi-kun did, but... Yeah, never mind. I'm sorry. Good night.
I'm hanging up. Click. Satoshi Hojo. Just who are you? I scorned you as a coward who ran away, abandoning his sister. I always thought you didn't have the right to call yourself her Nini, but now I didn't know what to think. Oyashiro-sama's curse on the 4th year, their aunt's death, and Satoshi's disappearance. And now... me, trying to carry out Oyashiro-sama's curse on the 5th. Oddly enough, what I was going to do overlapped perfectly with Satoshi the day before the curse. No, that wasn't all. If we start back from Satoko being abused, then I'd been overlapping with Satoshi for days already. When I talked to Mion before, she asked me if I was Satoshi. If that was the first impression a third party like Mion got, then it was probably true. Then, as Satoshi had accomplished, I would succeed in the murder. But that was the extent to which we overlapped. I was far calmer than Satoshi, and more calculating. If Mion got the same phone call last year and thought he might have killed his aunt, I wonder if Mion thinks Keiichi was going to do something similar with the uncle. Maybe. Oops. I could actually grow calmer the more enthusiastic I became. That's why I wouldn't follow in Satoshi's footsteps. I would snip him cleanly out of the world, and then get our peaceful life back. Maybe Satoshi has been with me ever since I chose to use Satoshi's bat as my weapon. No, maybe even longer than that. When I decided I'd be her Nini, maybe Satoshi had been residing within me then, too. God damn it, I keep yawning. Actually, let me set my alarms for tomorrow before I forget. Just thinking about that. Satoshi, were you really a coward? Or are you a true Nini even now? The kind worthy of Satoko's love? Ew, that's gay. I'd never met him, never spoken to him. Didn't even know his face. And yet I felt so connected to him. I'd never felt that way before. New tips unlocked. Note on the housewife murder case. Okay. Achievement unlocked. Possessed. Let's view new tips. For the attention of those on the housewife slaughter case. Okay. July something, 1982. Okinomiya Police Station, 1st Investigative Division. Chief Takasugi. Gifu Prefecture, Police Headquarters for the Eradication of Drug-Related Crime. Shishibone Branch Head. Regarding incident designated as undercover investigation. Okay, fair enough, Daisy. This message is to inform you that a section of the testimony records of an incident under this police headquarters jurisdiction has been found that is thought to be related to the undercover investigation of the incident in question, Okinomiya Police Station X, Hinamizawa Village housewife slaughter incident. During investigation of suspect, redacted, who was arrested for possession of illegal drugs, there was testimony alluding to the crime in question, and it became clear that it contained information that only the perpetrator could have known. Therefore, we are prepared to share this record of testimony with you, duplicate attached. If this testimonial is to be believed, then there is an extremely high chance that the suspect was the perpetrator in the incident in question. In addition, on receiving this testimony, the head investigator on the case inquired as to the incident with the Okinomiya Police Station, but the responsible party at Okinomiya Police Station misunderstood, and in compliance with the designation as an undercover investigation by executive order from Prefectural Police Headquarters on July 1st, 1982, General Administration B-112, they did not explain the incident's existence to the head investigator as they should have. Because of this, the head investigator did not realize the importance of the testimony as it related to the case in question, and as a result was negligent when combing the scene. We apologize for having effectively ignored it until now. In addition, there is a postscript stating that suspect died while in confinement yesterday on July something. Sunday. The fireworks I heard before noon were probably to announce the opening of the festival. And the weather certainly wasn't festival weather. It was cloudy. The television forecast was calling for possible downpours starting this evening and lasting until around midnight. But as long as it wasn't raining at the moment, the festival would go on. The festival had to open, or it wouldn't begin. The Furude Shrine grounds were probably decorated beautifully for the big performance that only happened once a year. Many paper lanterns were hung up, all in the auspicious colors of red and white. The sound of electric motors at the stalls, the voices of kids running around, their happy families watching them, smiling. Today was the festival of Watanagashi. Was everyone already partaking in the festivities? What about Satoko? Had she forgotten her days of suffering just for a few moments, while smiling that brilliant smile she hadn't in so long? This would probably be the longest day of my life. It would be a day I would remember vividly for as long as I lived. I told my parents I'd go to the festival this evening and lounged about during the early afternoon. We may have lived under the same roof, but they couldn't help being surprised by the deviation from how I usually spent my time. Glancing at my parents out of the corner of my eye, I went to the front door. I tied my shoes just a little tighter than normal, as if to express the firmness of my resolve in those knots. When I decided to murder Satoko's uncle, I was in such a state of excitement I almost went crazy. And when I was planning out the act of a murder, which went directly against all the morals fostered in me thus far, I was in such a state of calm I almost thought I'd lost my emotions. And then yesterday, When I learned Satoshi had made exactly the same phone call as me, I didn't know how to describe the muddled feelings I had then. And now, entering today, right now I lacked all the emotions I possessed until now. To make a simple analogy, it was the kind of feeling you might get right after you wake up, when you're still half asleep and you don't feel anything very clearly. I had no anger towards that man for the violence he committed against Satoko, nor did I feel sadness towards or sympathize with her. I felt no discontent towards my friends who had just waited and watched, never reaching out to her with any help, and no nervousness or fear towards the day that had finally come. Yes, right now, you could say I was in the best possible condition for carrying out a murder. When it came down to it, I would probably need to let my violent emotions take control. But right up until that moment, I would be like an insect. I would slowly, surely, and silently move towards my one objective. And then when I had my prey, I'd attack like a bullet. There was no emotion in that. Just the creeping mindset insects possessed. That sort of sneaking feeling was just the best. I would kill Satoko's uncle like he was a worm. I had to laugh a little at thinking that way, thinking like an insect. Tug. I tightened my laces one more time and walked out the door. I brought the shovel out of the front storeroom. I would need it to dig the man's grave. The shovel was a convenient one made for camping. If I twisted it like so and split it into 3, I could easily hide it in my bag. I twisted the shovel and dismantled it. And even though I'd done it countless times before, I had trouble for some reason. Like I was suddenly clumsy now. I knew why. It wasn't because I was nervous. My weak-willed self, deep within me, was hesitant. I knew that the act of dismantling the shovel was the first step I'd take to becoming a murderer. The last twist was conspicuously difficult, but it finally submitted before the strength of my determination. The area around Satoko's house was outside my circle of activity, but even just riding my bike in the middle of the day like this might seem suspicious to an observant person. I definitely want to avoid meeting and talking to someone I knew. With that in mind, I chose the route to my destination carefully. I didn't mind going the long way around. With how long this day would be, I could never be too careful after all. Still, I was fortunate enough not to run across anybody on my way to the planned site of the crime. I wasn't superstitious at this point, but it was a good omen. The place I would dig the hole was in this grove, a little further into the woods. I was worried I might not make it to the same place as before, since there were no signs to guide me, but I arrived there smoothly and as expected. I took another look around. Not even a hint of human presence. The air was a little bit damp, but it was comfortable in the cool shade of the trees. I took the disassembled shovel out of my bag and began skillfully putting it together. Then I stuck the tip of the shovel into a soft-looking patch of ground and pushed on it with my foot. The shovel would split into the earth if I put some strength into that foot. The act of doing so seemed awfully like the point of no return, and it made me hesitate. I was just digging a hole with a shovel, but it made me gulp hard. Calm down, Keiichi Maebara. Let's do a countdown. Get it done on the count of 3, okay? Alright. 1, 2... I couldn't do it on the countdown, despite it just being sticking the shovel into the ground. And I had to count down 5 or 6 times. Damn it. I'm just digging a hole! This is pathetic! As I thought that, I put strength into my heel like I was stepping on something unpleasant, and split came the sharp noise. It was only soft at the beginning. Roots and stones quickly got in my way, informing me just how hard it was to dig a hole big enough for a person. No decent person would ever come here anyway. Maybe it would be enough to cover him up with some dirt. Every time a naive thought like that crept into my mind, I bit down on it with my teeth and dug even harder. I've dug enough now. I could hide him like this. Every time I thought that, I would go down into the hole, and grow disappointed at how shallow it was, and return to digging. The thin layer of sweat on my brow eventually formed into drops and fell to the ground. My back was in even worse shape. My damp shirt adhered to my skin, and it felt so disgusting. The things I couldn't stand the most were the mosquitoes. Maybe they were attracted by the scent of my sweat. The white and black striped mosquitoes would cling to me whenever I let my guard down. It was hot. It was disgusting. I was sticky. I was itchy. All those uncomfortable feelings surged through me in waves. Damn it all! So what? Are you telling me to pack up and go home? Is that it? I hadn't yelled at anyone. It was me talking to myself. Me telling myself something. Why was I feeling this way and digging a hole all the way out here? What benefit would digging this hole give me? What harm would there be in not digging this hole at all? Wait, in the first place, who ordered me to dig? When I thought it over, maybe ever since grade school, or even before that, my whole life had only been me doing what other people told me to. I didn't mean it was somehow constrained, living a life just based on the commands of others. And I didn't mean I was too lazy to try and find my own road in life. Metaphorically speaking, yes, it was like a road. I'd never been particularly physically fit. I didn't hit puberty very early, and if all my classmates and I got in a line, I'd usually be on the shorter end. My scores in jump rope competitions and marathons are the very picture of average, and it wasn't like the captains of the dodgeball teams would have a passionate rock-paper-scissors contest to see which would get me. During those kindergarten and grade school years, it felt like someone was only worth how fast they grew and how fit they were. Looking back on it now, it was really uncomfortable for me. The thing that turned all that around was just a few words from my mother. Keiichi, would you like to go to a cram school? You'll better grasp what you're learning in school and it'll be more fun. The very first test I took at the cram school was kind of like a game. It was a lot of fun. It wasn't like the tests with the exact same problem dozens of times in a row. Every question had a picture to it, almost like one of those puzzle books that came with manga magazines. What do you think? Who? If my studies at school had been like this, it would have been way more fun. Several days later, I went to the cram school again with my mother and the enrollment paperwork. Mom and the person at the cram school had a really long, heated discussion, so I accidentally dozed off and missed most of what they said, but I clearly remember one point. Mom had made a loud groan, surprised at something. By 61, do you mean his average score was 61 points? No, not at all, Mrs. Maibara. The deviation from the mean of all our cram student schools across the country is 61. He's showing extraordinary numbers, even on a simple intelligence test. First, I would like to say that Keiichi Maibara-kun is extremely bright. Keiichi? But he doesn't have very good grades at school. He has average marks on his report card. B's, C's, D's. Is there some kind of mistake? We cross-checked with several tests as well, and we learned some very interesting things as a result. Maibara-kun is extremely weak when faced with questions that don't have any meaning. He just has no interest in simple, dull questions that don't have to do with everyday life. So even if he doesn't know what 2 plus 3 is, if you told him he had 2 apples then got 3 more, he would understand that sort of question? That's right. For example, instead of telling him to draw a flattened, foldable cube, what if we asked him what a die would look like when cut open? If we did that, he can answer beautifully. Then the person from the cram school showed her a page from one of the exams I took. It was a paper with questions about construction. Construction questions were unusual, so they were really cool, weren't they? In this question, it asks to draw an unfolded regular icosahedron, a shape with 20 faces. When we rephrased it and asked him how he would cut out a piece of cardboard to create a 20-sided die, Keiichi-kun drew the answer as though it were easy. This is not something an average child can do. Keiichi, have you ever made a die with 20 sides from a magazine extra or anything? Dice only went from 1 to 6. I had never even considered before this test that there were dice with more than 6 sides. So it was fun to imagine what kind of shape a die that went up to 20 would have. If I had a die like that, I could win at Snakes and Ladders against anyone. So I immediately wanted to make it. Finally, I entered cram school. There were only 4 students in the class they put me in, which was called Select. It was the highest class, and some of my classmates were in lower classes, and when I remembered how much better they had done at things like dodgeball and the 50-meter sprint, I felt happiness well up within me for the first time. Even if I wasn't as good as them physically, I triumphed over them in other ways. It was fun at first. The more I did, the more I was praised. My teachers at school suddenly started pampering me, and it felt good. Snakes and Ladders, the board game champions, yeah. My parents were satisfied too, and I enjoyed seeing them satisfied. The more I listened to my parents' commands, the more fun things got. That did happen, didn't it? I grinned dryly in self-deprecation. Because, well, my studious lifestyle didn't end up lasting very long. It was only at the beginning I enjoyed learning more and more. I gradually got along less with my friends. My classes were behind what I was learning in cram school, and I eventually stopped respecting the teachers, given that they could put me to sleep with their lectures. And, well, I was a disagreeable sort who bragged a lot about how much I knew, and the ways of the world wouldn't let me remain in that state of ecstasy forever. I would do as I was told, then I'd go above and beyond their expectations, and then they praised me. I was happy for that, and the cycle repeated itself like the wheels on a bike. I thought moving forward like that was how life worked, like a bicycle. When I moved to Hinamizawa, I realized just how inadequate it was. Some things happened, and we started saying how moving and getting a change in atmosphere would be nice. And then my father, he had a place that he liked, that he'd gone to a few times to draw the nature. He started saying that he wanted to bring his atelier there. Oops, I forgot to go into Do Not Disturb mode. With me in blank amazement, they decided to move to Hinamizawa. And after that, I met them, didn't I? The first day after transferring here, I went to the classroom with the teacher. I thought it would seem pitiful for her to bring me in there, so I placed my hand on the door before she could, slammed it open, and set foot into the room. Clatter. The thrilling, powerful way I opened that door was none other than my own determination to try doing my life over again. And then, within seconds, that determination took a hard counter to the face. A blackboard eraser fell on me. Plus, there was a huge rock inside. It was a supremely painful trap someone had set up. Oh, come on. Satoko was already beating me right from the first day I transferred? That frightened me. I was bewildered. The class was surprised, too. I wasn't just surprised that the students in the class were all in different grades and were different genders. It was because the room felt completely different from the schools I knew, and as I spent more time with them, my surprise continued to grow. This fresh sense of surprise had never left my life, even to this day. Every day was a fresh new surprise. I've never had a single boring day since coming here. The days were lively, spent with the other club members. We played Old Maid with cards with scratches on the back to cheat. We let all our passions go wild during our games. We went all out as regular participants in tournaments at the toy store in town, and many, many more things. Recently, during those times, there was the bento competition. It was then. That's when I saw an unexpected side to Satoko. Thinking back on it, I only ate dinner with her two nights. It was such sweet, gentle time spent, and it warmed my heart remembering it even now. I realized that Satoko was pretending to be stubborn and firm, and how brave she was, part of her heart always waiting for her Nini to come home. And I vowed to become her Nini. Satoko may have been nagging and overly critical, but she knew how to take care of someone. But though it might have seemed like she was taking the lead, it was actually her way of depending upon another person. Even if Satoshi and Satoko's lives as siblings were confined by their uncle and his wife, they were still warm, sunny days. When did those sunny days all go wrong? What mistake was made? Lamenting tragedies of the past would do no good, and I told myself that so many times. But I did anyway. Keiichi. Isn't that why you chose your own path? To take back that life? Nobody ordered you to do this. You decided it on your own. You don't desire anyone's praise for this. Oh, hello, baby boo. It did get adapted into an anime, yes. It's my favorite anime, actually, so that's why I'm going through the visual novels. You thought it all through yourself. You'll carve it out yourself. And you'll do it now. This wasn't a path I could see very far down, not unlike the road parents or society could offer. It was a narrow path, dark and utterly distressing, one for which the next step would always be shrouded in darkness. But that disheartening path would keep on going forever. It was an unlimited path, and there was nowhere I couldn't travel. The kind of path only available to those able to imagine where they wanted to go. Don't be ashamed at breaking from the brightly lit, paved road. In fact, feel proud that you found your very own path to walk. And I hadn't discarded the paved road either. Once I achieved my goal, I would go back to that bright road. And then, I'd spend those average sunny days at my leisure. Crush. When I next realized it, the hole had grown so deep I couldn't believe it. Did I dig all this myself? I think digging this much is enough, right? I put my shovel into the bottom of the hole. I would drag the body here, throw it into the hole, and cover it up with dirt. Even if it took me time to camouflage it by putting plants on top, it would all go so much more easily than digging this hole had. I glanced at my watch. It was almost evening, and I hadn't realized it. I may not have felt the time passing, but digging a hole this deep must have taken quite a lot of time. I took a seat on a slanted rock nearby, and wiped the sweat from my brow. Now, once it got a little darker, I'd go get the metal bat I hid in the schoolyard. Then I'd make the call to lure him out. And then, I'd do it. The number of things I needed to do to reach that moment were dwindling. I felt that moment closing in on me much more keenly than I did the passage of time. I didn't have any hesitation, but I still felt that. A contradiction. At every step in this process, I had a few chances to hesitate, to turn back, to let myself lose my nerve. Having to endure those million temptations and wait for when the time was right was an indescribably slow and painful torture. I'd thought myself acting all weak because of that, but I stopped midway through. This is okay. It was fine. I could detest the abnormal act of homicide as much as I wanted, and it didn't matter. I wasn't going to be a cutthroat killer after today. I would pass through this strange day and go back to the world I was in before. If I fell to the level of a psychopath who thought nothing of killing, I wouldn't be able to go back to my old life. So this was fine with me. I didn't have to feel ashamed at hesitating to kill, because I was human. It was so funny to me that I'd be the bearer of Oyashiro-sama's curse at the same time I was aware I was human. I exhaled lightly and stood. I concealed my presence and sharpened my senses in all directions to search for anyone around but me. Okay, let's go. One step at a time. I would walk my own path. A path no one had forced me to walk. Let's do this. Keiichi Maebara. The cicadas made an annoying fuss. Their chorus covered up the suspicious noise of me breaking twigs underfoot, and their chorus filled the path far ahead of me, letting me know I would be alone for some time. The cicadas blessed the path I walked, encouraging me with every last ounce of strength they had. The sky was far above. In not even an hour, the veil of night would draw near, and the sky would be tinted with dusk. By that time, the Higurashi would let me hear their chorus in place of the cicadas. When that happened, would everything be over with? Would everything have ended? I said something along those lines when I left Satoko's fate up to a public agency, but this time was different. I would do it. I would carry it out. I would end it. It would all be over very soon. Everything would end. Yes. When the Higurashi cried. There was nobody at school. I couldn't hear the playful voices of children. This was the first time I'd seen the school with such a lack of human presence. Still, I quieted my breath and looked around, not wanting to be unprepared. It had gotten darker outside, but it was almost like my eyes could see more clearly now. I made absolutely sure of my safety, then walked to the heavy construction machine I'd hidden the metal bat behind. I had a tinge of worry, a premonition, that someone had found the bat and hidden it somewhere else as a prank. If that happened, would I take that as an opportunity to desist? If it really wasn't there, then... The sensation of chilled metal. It was still here where I left it. It hadn't run away. Satoshi hadn't run away. He waited here patiently for me. Sorry for the wait, Satoshi. It's been a long time coming. You prepared for this? Through the metallic touch, Satoshi grins at me in my mind. That's what I should be asking, you know. I did this last year already. You should be more worried about yourself. Right on, Satoshi. Let's show him a bad time. Satoshi's back got lighter and lighter, and fit into my hands like it was being absorbed. It didn't feel wrong to swing this. I could move it around so naturally it was like an extension of my own right arm. Of course it felt like that. Satoshi and I were holding one bat together. Next, I would make the call to lure the man out. It wasn't a bad time for it. My friends were doubtlessly parading happily through the stalls. I hadn't considered where to make the call from. My house and Satoko's are pretty far apart. If I called from my house, I wouldn't make it. Couldn't I use the school phone? But as I thought, the room was locked up and I couldn't get in. Shit. I'm so naive. You should have at least figured this part out. I couldn't call him. And just for that, was today all over? I'm sorry, Satoshi. And just as I cursed my own naivete, a miracle occurred. A bicycle came into the schoolyard. It was a familiar middle-aged man. The one from the Forest Service field office. Why? Wasn't today Sunday? Was he here to pick up something he forgot? Anyway, the forest officer went around back and felt around in his pocket, then unlocked the door and entered. The best possible coincidence, and it had to be Satoshi who saved me. The metal bat, through just my contact with it, told me this was a chance I couldn't allow to slip by. The sections for the forest office and the school were neatly separated. I felt the man head into the forest office's storehouse, which was so far in the back so the students weren't allowed into it. The door didn't match its fittings well, so it didn't close all the way, and the gap in the door opened slowly as if to lure me in. I took a deep breath and went in. I tiptoed along, silently and stealthily, and made it into the teacher's lounge. That was the only place with a phone. As I held my breath in the teacher's lounge, I heard the forestry service officer walking back over. Then the back door clattered shut and was locked. I glanced out the window at the schoolyard and watched as the man got on his bike like nothing had happened and rode out the school gate. The school once again emptied, becoming deathly silent. I waited for a bit to make sure the silence was the real deal, then reached for the telephone on the principal's desk. I fished Satoko's house's phone number out of my pocket. Yes, the number in the class directory for Satoko had been the one from their house now, where she lived with her uncle. I touched the dial with my fingers, then thought for a moment about what to say exactly when he picked up, despite how many times I'd gone over it in my head last night. Now that I had my finger on the dial like this, it started to seep out of my mind like a cracked bucket leaking water. Simple would be best. More importantly, to say it straight and not sound suspicious. I counted off 3 heartbeats and spun the dial. The call sound. Would Satoko's uncle pick up? Now of all times, the hope that he wouldn't pick up, and the feeling of doom and the knowledge that I couldn't save Satoko if he didn't, whirled around in a vortex. Hello? It was the voice of a grumpy man, like he'd just woken up. He picked up. Hello? Say your name so I know you're Hojo, you asshole! It would be terrible if I got it wrong. I made up my mind. I had all the initiative on my side. Here we go. This is the Shishibone Okinomiya police station. Am I speaking to the Hojo residents? I was changing my voice, but did he really think I sounded like an adult? Would he believe I was the police? Oh, yes. This is Hojo. We currently have your daughter, Satoko Hojo, here with us. What? Satoko? What did that brat do? He fell for it. I could tell by how tense he was that he didn't doubt my words. I can explain the particulars once you've arrived here. Would you mind coming to the station right away? Right now? I already took a bath myself, so I don't really want to go on like this, though. What? You don't want to come because you already took a bath? Yes, right away. Right away. Jeez, man. What the heck did Satoko do? I'll explain once you're here. I will be waiting. Thank you for your assistance. 1 second. I don't know where the police station is. Where am I going? You moron, what the hell? The Okinomiya police station? I don't know where it is either. Aren't you from around here? Why don't you know that? A greasy sweat came over my body. Eventually, just as I was about to choke, he spoke. Oh, next to the fire station, right? That's pretty far. Thank goodness he remembered on his own for me. I didn't care where the police station was, so long as he left his house to get there. Then we'll be waiting here. Wait. Who am I asking for once I get there? What's your name? On top of that, he wanted to know my name? Just leave your goddamn house already! Maebashi! Excuse me. That was close. I almost thoughtlessly told him my real name. I managed to change the last syllable of it, but I put the receiver down like I was running away. My fingers were trembling, and I was soaked with a tepid sweat. I wasn't just nervous about the phone call. With that call, everything had finally been put into motion. I left the school. It was locked before, but it was easy enough to open from the inside. But I couldn't lock it again after I left. In terms of being thorough, I wanted to lock it, but I couldn't waste time going back to the teacher's lounge and looking for the key. I needed to rush back fast as I could and ambush him. I zoomed back to the scene on my bike. If Satoko's uncle got out of town before I got there, everything would be over. He'd learned there was no one at the station named Maebashi, and things would get pretty messed up. As I returned at full speed, I passed a family wearing yukatas. They must have been on their way to the festival. Many people in Hinamizawa knew my face, though I didn't know theirs. Even just passing by them like this made me uneasy. But I didn't generally come around here, so those living in the area might not have known much about me. That didn't matter right now. I needed to get back as fast as possible, to control my breathing and to ambush the man. I hid my bike in a thicket and picked up Satoshi's bat, which I'd just left hidden in the shade. And then I held my breath, waiting to see someone. I wondered if he still hadn't gotten here. Or maybe he went right out after the phone call and passed by here already. I couldn't figure out which it was, and was set upon by an indescribable impatience. Calm down, Keiichi Maebara. Even if he came here already, he'd pass by here on the way back, right? The end result would be the same. It wouldn't change the fact that he'd die. He'd probably be coming on his motorcycle. How would I stop him then? I figured it would be best not to think too hard and just hit him as he passed, or beat him out of his seat. The path was made of pebbles. If I hit him as hard as I could and made him lose his balance, he wouldn't be able to help falling. And then... the chorus of the Higurashi stopped. The sound of a bike approached from far away. I couldn't tell what sort of motorcycle it was from its sound, but I'd seen it parked before, so I'd know. It was getting rapidly closer. It was almost here. If he just went a little farther, he'd cross into that thicket and appear in front of me. I'd take a moment to make sure it was him. Then when I had, I'd put my plan into action. The motorcycle appeared. A few easily identifiable characteristics told me it was Satoko's uncle's bike, without a doubt. Was it really him? Was it really Satoko's uncle? I wasn't making a mistake, was I? I looked at its characteristics again. Its color, shape, and most of all, the man's clothes. And his face. Those last feelings of hesitation, I did away with them. Satoko. Now, your Nini will end it, okay? Closer. Closer. The bike came closer. Let's go. Satoshi! Yeah. I jumped out of the thicket. I used my shoulder to basically tackle the uncle on the bike with all my might. Ah! He gave a dumb shout as his bike completely lost its balance. Finally it fell, the bike scattering clouds of sand, and after spinning it stopped. Her uncle, tossed to the ground, didn't understand what had just happened, and groaned for a few moments crouched on the ground. My breathing started to become ragged. No, I couldn't have this emotion. Some weird secretion crossed through my brain and nearly made me hallucinate. Her uncle was groaning. Now was the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. What was I doing? All the sounds in the world cut off. My mental chaos from a moment ago withdrew like a lie, and I could feel the temperature in my head rapidly cooling down. The tension in my muscles all went away like the strings they'd been attached to had been cut, and I let my hands dangle at my sides. It wasn't quite like exhaustion. Have you calmed down now, Keiichi Maebara? Do you need to remember again why things got to this point today? Scrape. Scrape. I stepped over the pebbled path, taking one step, another step, and then another towards Satoko's uncle. The more I walked, the more my breathing calmed. The more I walked, the more I felt my body cooling, calming, chilling with frost. Yes, at this moment, this guy had lost permission to live. I had just rescinded it. So he mustn't stay in this world any longer. If he lived any longer, if Satoko's misfortune continued, it would be my responsibility for having allowed him to live. I could feel the cooling substance going through my whole body, even down to my capillaries. Her uncle was at my feet now, still on the ground like an idiot. I smiled coldly at how ridiculous he looked. That hurt. Well, this is narration. It's taking place over a shorter time than it's taking me to read it, presumably. That's all it took for it to hurt? Satoko's heart hurt much more. And now you're gonna feel that. And with your life, I'll make up for her pain! I erased all unnecessary information from my mind. I prioritized the murder of this man. Execute. Execute. Execute! Wham! Utterly calmly, I delivered my first strike to the back of his head. I wanted to get at the most effective spot. At least during that first moment, I'd have to attack him while he was at his most defenseless. And if he was hit in the head, he'd cover his head. It was a defensive reaction all humans made, like machines. He used both hands to cover his head, so he couldn't pick himself up off the heap he was in on the ground. Like pounding a caterpillar into the dirt, I hit him over and over. If he covered his head, I'd hit him in the side. If he covered his body, I'd go for his head. If he rolled over, I'd strike his feet, his knees, his elbows. I didn't care where anymore. By just delivering one blow after another, I induced panic in him. I retained my overwhelming advantage, but I hadn't done nearly enough to deliver a fatal wound. Her uncle skillfully pulled himself up off the ground and started to run like a fleeing rabbit. It wasn't a judgment he'd made after seeing my face and deciding whether to fight me. Right now, he was fleeing by instinct, just trying to escape from the threat that had presented itself. A counterattack from the more physically capable uncle was what I was most concerned about. He may have run, but it wasn't all that unlucky. And the odds were in my favor. The uncle didn't run away towards people, but off the path and into the woods. How pleasant that he would run in a direction where nobody else was. He was fleeing into strange geography, like a rat that instinctively runs into tight spots over and over. Yes, he was no longer human. He was a rat. The blood vessels in my legs expanded, and my total oxygen supply increased. I lowered myself to gain the most explosive velocity I could. Without breathing, I became a wind-like shadow, and dashed. I crossed thickets, crushed dead tree branches underfoot, and dove through the woods like a bullet. He ran so cowardly, arms flailing as he went. After catching up to him, I didn't need so much as a blink of an eye to strike him again. My senses, mind, and body were all sharpened purely to kill this man. This was the first time I'd felt like this. Well, this was the first experience I'd ever had killing someone. It felt natural continuing to do this for the first time. And that meant I had this much talent for killing. Or perhaps the act of killing was so simple that anyone could do it. I didn't struggle or grow tired at all chasing the clumsily fleeing uncle. No matter how much he ran, it was like trying to get away from his own shadow. He couldn't get away from me. I could easily aim at his back, his shoulder, and his head, even from this unnatural stance. Each time I struck him, he wailed in pain and begged pitifully for forgiveness, but it didn't disturb my mind. I was neither excited nor plagued by hesitation like before. I felt sharp. I felt like a carnivore. Of course, so did the uncle who was trying to run away because he didn't want to die. He didn't want to be eaten, like a herbivore running with all its might, trying to get away. Despite all the attacks, despite all the hits, he kept on fleeing without even staggering. And despite the bad footing in the forest, he impressively never tripped over anything. But there was no need to admire that fact. It was simply proof that he was no more than an animal. If he was chased, he would run. If he was going to be killed, he would run. He bared his fangs at the weak, but couldn't oppose the strong whatsoever. He was lowly, vulgar, a diminutive animal. Such a puny little creature had harmed Satoko. Scar after scar to her body and mind. Deep wounds that might not ever go away as long as she lived. My cold and calm emotions suddenly turned into bestial ones. My personality changed into something specialized for murder, purely to devour the diminutive animal before me. The uncle gave a puny little shriek, covered his head, and ran. I'm impressed by how much you can run. Fine, run as much as you like. I will be your death. I will choose the moment at my leisure. Your legs will hurt, your lungs will feel about to burst, and your head will hurt from lack of oxygen. If you feel the pain has become worse than death, then by all means stop at any time. Without turning back, suffocating on his terror of the approaching death, he just ran shamefully onward. He ran but was chased, his head bashed with a metal bat, sweat and drool flying everywhere, blood clinging to him. From his mouth came the sounds of coarse, irregular breathing and high-pitched screaming that verged on crying. And pleas for forgiveness to someone, I didn't know who. Each and every second was a second of atonement that I granted him. Now, run. Then fall, and moan, and die! Where did you even crawl out of, anyway? You were never here before. If you were never here, you never should have showed up. If you never showed up, our lives would still be fun and enjoyable. We would have gone to today's festival, waited for each other, and gone to the shrine, laughing. We would have been playing amongst the stalls right about now. We'd be browsing the strange food stalls you only saw at festivals, trying to get prizes from goldfish scooping, ring throwing, or target practice. Mion would surely make it into a competition, and we as a club would have a grand time. And everyone would have been cheering for Rika-chan's dedication dance, and everyone would say how fun it was, and it would give us energy for days to come. Fun, enjoyable, and funny, warm times spent with friends. And that would have happened. But it didn't, and now it was all smashed to pieces. There was no doubt that would be what the world was like if you never showed up. You were the obstacle, the mistake, the heresy in that world. But I would correct that mistake now. I would erase you and make it so this last week never happened. Tonight was the Watanagashi Festival, the holy night where taking just one life was permitted in the name of Oyashiro-sama's curse. It looked like the Higurashi stopped crying at some point. When the Higurashi cried, everything would end. And the Higurashi silenced. Lowly one, the hour of atonement is at an end. The Higurashi have stopped their crying. Thus it is the end. The end! End! You don't have to run away anymore. Die with those dirty brains of yours smashed everywhere. Ah! Lightning and thunder struck like an explosion. It was so loud it shook the ground, and I smelt gunpowder. The response I got this time was clearly different from the one before. The metal bat crunched into the crown of his head. It was like the top of his head had caved in. The bat felt like it was biting him. It had been the final killing attack that visited him, when I didn't overlook the opening he left as his knees gave out under him. I remained alert for a few moments, then thud. He planted both knees in the ground and then fell forwards, burying his head in the ground. I'd been holding back my ragged breathing, but now it all came out of me like a dam bursting. My head was dizzy and light, and unable to maintain my balance, I leaned against a nearby tree. The uncle didn't try and guard his head any longer. After a disgusting sort of spasm, he stopped moving. Did I get him? Did I get him for sure? I fought back my exhausted urge to fall over where I stood, and drew towards him carefully, bat still at the ready. It was possible he was faking it and trying to wait it out. Should I check for a pulse? I realized right away, though, how unnecessary that would be. If I thought he might be faking it, then I would just have to keep pummeling him until I was satisfied. I fought back my ragged breathing again, and then I swung my bat far above and brought it down. Clunk. His body leaped like a bow, but he didn't try and cover his head. Then once again I aimed for his head and swung. His reaction was the same this time. After spending a few moments making his head into mochi, the hits gradually started to feel different, and it started to spray a filthy dark red liquid everywhere. That was enough. It was definite now. I had absolutely killed him. There was no sense of accomplishment, nor one of regret. I didn't feel anger towards Satoko's uncle, nor pity towards Satoko herself. Instead, right now, I was feeling like my heart had been stolen by the downpour. It had begun to rain at some point, and how comfortable it felt. The rainwater drenched my body and dripped down to the ground. The excitement within me faded, as the rain washed away the grime. In exchange, my shoes were so wet they made splashing sounds. And despite abusing Satoshi's bat like that, it wasn't bent very much. There were a few dents in it, probably from hitting the man, but nothing that would make it seem different from before. Instead, it had been stained, with black, with red, with mud and blood. But that itself would be evidence. The one piece of evidence needed to prove that my delusions hadn't just been daydreams, and that I'd ended Satoko's uncle for all eternity. Alright, Keiichi. Calm your mind. The time for passion is over. Now is the time to be cold as ice. Yeah, he did take a lot of hits. To be fair, Keiichi is a averagely built 14-year-old, and Teppei is a big old adult man, and he was running away from much of it, which probably would have minimized how hard Keiichi could hit him. I needed to bury the body. But where was I? I'd simply followed the man as far as he ran into the darkness. I couldn't take a guess as to how far we'd run. It was already pitch black around us, and the only light I had to go on was the very faint lights on the road a little further down. It was so dark out, I hadn't noticed the darkness until just now. My vision was so good I could see the man's ugly hairline. I could have counted the pores in his head. It was only now that I realized how much crazy strength I had mustered at that moment. I went over to the street light. I looked up and down the road, desperately trying to figure out where I was. This is... oh no. This was the one road connecting Hinamizawa to the town. We were unbelievably far away from Satoko's house. Had the two of us really run so far a distance? My surprise at that was accompanied by the miraculous fact that despite running so far and making so much noise, we hadn't come across anybody at all. There was a long way between here and the ambush location where I dug the hole. There was no way I could carry the body that far. Wait, aside from that, the bike the man took here was still lying in the middle of that path. That would be an issue. The police could tell whose motorcycle it was by looking at its license plate, and they wouldn't just leave it at that. Thankfully, the corpse was in a dark forest. In terms of urgency, dealing with the bike would come first, and I wanted to get the shovel back from where I'd left it next to the hole. I shouldn't drag the body there. I would have to deal with it right here. Fortunately, the ground was like mud from the downpour, and was more sludgy here than where I was before. I might be able to dig a grave quickly here. Of course, my bicycle was still over where I'd left it too. It still wasn't over. Homicide had only been half of my goal. The other half would be just as important as the first. I would completely hide the body, not allowing a beginning to happen. I would erase the man like he'd never existed, and regain the peaceful times we had before. I bent my head backwards, and calmed my mind even further. The big water droplets struck my brow mercilessly. They were actually quite comfortable, and for a while I let my desire have its way. After confirming that I was sharp again, I started running through the rain. The motorcycle was in the grass at the roadside. Considering how it looked, pelted with rain and covered in mud, it actually seemed like it had been lying there for a very long time. The plan was to drop the motorcycle into the swamp. The swamp was a bit of a walk from here. I lifted the bike up. I didn't think it would be so heavy. I was a little surprised, but once I had it upright, it was fairly easy to roll it along. Still, pushing this thing all the way to the swamp was really not something I wanted to do. I could no longer ignore my exhaustion, and it warned me numerous times of how far away the swamp was. This motorcycle, I wonder if I could ride it well enough. Once I got it going, it would be basically the same as a bicycle. Wouldn't it get me to the swamp quickly? A plan suggested by my exhaustion. The anxiety of getting on a motorcycle for the first time withdrew. I turned the key, and then you just kick this pedal, right? Yeah! Yeah! It's on! And then I gripped the handlebars, first the right, then the left. Ah! Maybe I twisted them too much. The bike lurched and did a wheelie like an angry horse. I lost it for a second, but it was just a problem of how much torque to apply. Let's try that again. This time, slowly, gently. That time it went well. It was strange to be on a two-wheeled vehicle that would go even if I didn't pedal. Very odd, but I got used to it quickly. Mion once told me you could get a scooter license within a day, and she was clearly right. This is pretty easy. I needed to throw the metal bat into the swamp too, but I didn't know how I would pack the bat onto the motorcycle. Without much other choice, I stuffed it into the back of my shirt, feeling like a ninja carrying a katana. If I put the tip down the seat of my pants and hunched over, it wouldn't fall out. I got back on the bike and, this time, got going without any difficulty. I carefully pressed the button labeled light, and a rather strong light came on, illuminating the way forward. I probably really shouldn't have turned it on, but I didn't have any way of seeing at this point, and had zero confidence I could ride through this darkness. As the rain came down on me, I maintained a precarious balance and inched my way towards the swamp. Along the way, I ran across a few people who seemed to be returning from the festival, but none of them had any interest in me. They were either all soaked through with the rain and hurrying on their ways home, or had their umbrellas low and their heads down. Yesterday I might have been wary of even these passers-by, but right now it didn't seem to be much cause for concern. In fact, it would probably be less suspicious to be riding out in the open like this instead of sneaking around. More and more, though, I started to think of that idea as naive, brought on by my exhausted state. I climbed a steep hill. On a bike, the hill would have put me out of breath, but I just had to accelerate a little bit to climb the entire thing. Motorcycles sure are convenient. For a moment, its lights illuminated a sign before I passed by it. Onigafuchi Swamp. Good children do not play around here. Still, it wasn't like the way to the swamp was cordoned off by a metal fence or anything. Parents and teachers would get mad at you if they found out you were playing in the swamp, but some of the bad kids in my class apparently snuck out here sometimes to see the giant crayfish in the place. They talked before about how they go to the candy shop and buy some pickled squid, and then just tie it to a fishing line and throw it, and all the crayfish would come running. Once I got off to the bank, there was a tiny ritual shrine and traditional ropes on one of the trees. And as it swallowed the downpour hull, the blackened swamp had waited for me. If I slammed on the accelerator from the cliff-like stop I was on now, the thing would fly straight into the middle of the swamp. I had to be careful not to fall in with it. If I drowned and disappeared, man, what a stupid ghost story that would be. On the night of Watanagashi, Satoko's uncle's corpse was found in a thicket by the road leading to town, and Keiichi Maebara went missing. People would whisper that I'd been demoned away. The 5th year's curse would be a half-baked one. I got off the bike and twisted the accelerator as hard as I could. I let go just when it seemed like it would drag me forward. The bike shot off the cliff and was swallowed down into the swamp, leaving a far fainter splash than I'd imagined. Its surface was being pummeled by the downpour, and the muddy, filthy water was flowing into it. I couldn't even make out the motorbike I'd just thrown in there. It was pretty heavy after all. It would be quickly engulfed by the soft mud at the bottom of the swamp, and it would be pulled deeper and deeper until it reached hell itself. I felt no reluctance whatsoever in throwing the man's motorbike down to the land of the demons, but I did have a tinge of regret about Satoshi's bat. I washed the bat with muddy water, and the gore sticking to it came off easily. I'd sort of shared today's events with Satoshi, so I wanted to give it a quiet place to stay. That's how I felt. I started to feel more like returning it to the locker from before, so it could continue to keep watch over Satoko. Satoshi. I probably, well, misunderstood you. Satoshi listened quietly without nodding. I'm absolutely convinced now. You were the one who beat your aunt to death last year and saved Satoko. I always scorned you and called you a coward who ran away, but I was wrong. To the rest of the world, some deviant was behind that incident, but I know. That was something you did for her. And then you disappeared. You finally got back that peace, and lost it within days. So I swear to you that I will live life to the fullest from now on. Live it enough for the both of us. I will live on as though this week, this day, never happened. But I will never forget this short time we shared together for as long as I live. I didn't know what expression Satoshi made as he listened, but as someone who had protected the same girl, I felt he had smiled and given me his blessing. And then, my hand moved of its own accord, and the bat I had hesitated to throw away left my hands and flew through the air. It traveled its parabolic path, spinning all the while, and the swamp absorbed it without a sound. There weren't even any ripples when it hit the surface. That surface was tempestuous because of the downpour, and the bat was long gone. For a moment I regretted having thrown it, but I realized that might have been what Satoshi had wanted. You're right. I still can't let myself give in to emotion just yet. I would return for my shovel, get on my bike, dig a hole to hide the body, and bury it. It seemed like a simple sequence of events, but I felt extremely exhausted, and I had to do it all tonight. Satoshi left me with only the advice that I needed to finish this up soon, then fell silent for eternity, and disappeared at the bottom of the demon's abyss. I returned to the path I'd ambushed her uncle on. My bike was hidden, sleeping in the brush. I stood it back up. My whole body felt heavy, but I needed to finish by the end of the day, even if I had to whip myself to do it. Oh, I forgot something. I didn't just come here for my bike. The shovel was here too. Not good. I was zoning out. Every once in a while, if I let my guard down, my vision would almost go black. Pull yourself together, Keiichi Maebara. It's still not over. I went into the grove of trees and looked for the hole in which I'd hidden the shovel. Unfortunately, I'd hidden it deep in the forest, not wanting it to be seen, and now everything was black in the night, and I couldn't see anything anymore. I reawakened my fading consciousness and realized just how big this annoyance really was. Wait, you can't be serious! The sweat the rain washed away before came back up to my skin, deep, deep in the forest where the streetlights could never reach. The fact that it would be so pitch black had been completely uncalculated. With this much darkness, even if I had been able to kill him right away like I planned, I didn't know if I still could have buried him without a problem. What should I do? I simply couldn't find the shovel tonight. If I forced myself to go deep into the forest, I'd lose even my sense of direction and might actually get lost in there. That might have been an exaggeration, but it was fully possible I'd trip over a tree root and sprain a muscle. Oh right, my house's storage room. There was another shovel there, the same fold-up kind. Couldn't I go back to the house, get the shovel, and give up on finding the shovel tonight? It's not as though the name Maebara is written on the shovel, but it seemed like an unusual item from an import variety store made in another country, so I didn't want to leave that shovel here. But in this darkness, I couldn't do anything. I should give up and go back to the storage room. And there was an electric lantern in there. If I used that for light, I could look for it. But it was so extremely dark. Could I light the way with just the lantern? The light of a lantern in this dark night. I couldn't discard the possibility of it drawing eyes, and I doubted if I could find the shovel with the lantern's feeble light. Besides, I'd left the body there for a pretty long time already. My sense of fear, dulled through excessive exhaustion, finally reared its ugly head. Anyway, for now, the most important thing was to hide the body. A shovel being found wouldn't be a big deal, but a corpse? If they found that, I'd share the same fate as Satoshi. First I'd go back to the storage room at home. Then I'd get the lantern. Now that it's gotten this dark, I might still need light to dig a hole for the body too, and I'd get the other shovel. And then I'd deal with the body first thing. Once that was done, I'd come back here, find the shovel, and bring it back. I had to do at least that much, but I was so tired. But complaining was getting me nowhere. If I started getting complacent now, everything will have been for naught. At some point, I'd sat down. I gritted my teeth, and endured, lifting my heavy hips. The night was young. Of all the nights I'd experienced, none had ever been this long. When would it all end? The night was young. The lights at home were dazzlingly bright. Suddenly, they reminded me of how hungry I was. I checked the clock and saw that it was almost 7. I thought for sure it was 2 or 3 in the morning already. I was surprised at how messed up my biological clock had gotten just from this one night. There was a warm light coming from the curtains in the living room window. The worlds between here and what was beyond those curtains were so different. If only that man hadn't shown up, I would have been in that light. I'd still be excited from the festival, and I'd be talking to my parents about how much fun I had with all my friends. And then, even though they made a hot meal for me, I would have eaten way too much at the stalls, barely eaten any of it, and gone back to my room. No doubt I'd crawl into my futon and easily let myself fall asleep. But right now I was completely different. There wasn't a single ember of warmth from those weak streetlights. Right now I was unconnected to any time spent with my family. There was neither warm food nor the time to allow myself to sleep. My body exposed to the cold rain. I knew that I simply had to spur myself on to accomplish what I must. I realized how timid, how cowardly I was becoming. For what purpose did I need to kill someone so badly that it was worth feeling this terrible? I'd lost sight of that purpose. I selected the fastest, most fundamental way of saving Satoko, and executed it without hesitation. That man was dead. He was gone. He would never, ever hurt Satoko again. We all thought frantically for days on end about Satoko's problem, and finally, with no options, we gave up, and I had solved it in one night. By myself, without anyone's help. Right about now, Satoko would be making dinner for her uncle, despite not knowing when he'd return, and she might be spending the night trembling in fear of whether he'd yell at her for how it tasted. But her uncle wouldn't come home. She wouldn't have to fear his wrath, nor let him make her feel sad. I see. I did it. I successfully saved Satoko. All I'd been thinking about for a long time was killing that man, and I'd forgotten the feeling that it was actually all to save her. I did. I did something good. That's right. I did something good, didn't I? I felt hot tears coming from my eyes, and that's when I first realized that the exhaustion I'd been feeling was actually guilt. The blade of guilt, for a while now, had just been scraping away with its tip, hurting my heart. It hurt so bad I couldn't stand it. It was throbbing painfully. It hurt so much it was so painful that I cried. I cried tears of joy at saving Satoko. I didn't know why, really, anymore. I just cried. My tears fell and fell. As I stood there for a while, coming to terms with those warm tears, my heart was comforted a little. All right, Keiichi Maebara. That's enough. There's nothing to regret or feel ashamed about. Both my body and mind were thoroughly exhausted, and that was a fact. It was only natural I couldn't feel anything. Even tomorrow and the day after that, I might not be able to feel anything for a while. But there was one thing that was true. There was the indisputable fact that I had saved Satoko. One day we would surely be rewarded. One day I would be proud of how distressing an enterprise I'd undertaken to get Satoko's smile back. And so that I could wait for that day, I had to put the finishing touches on this night. If I left it undone, everything I'd accomplished today would be for naught. I looked back up at the sky, which didn't look like it would stop raining anytime soon. Then I rubbed my eyes and summoned forth energy from my core again. How long did I plan on spacing out? This isn't the time for daydreaming. Someone could find that corpse this very moment. That pessimistic thought was proof that the very natural emotion of fear had returned to me. As I allowed the fear to spur me onwards, I went to look for the other shovel and the lantern inside the storage room. It was fortunate. I remembered what it looked like around the streetlight the body was near. With how dark it was quite possible I wouldn't have been able to look for it either. I didn't realize that when I left the place, so the idea of memorizing the spot hadn't even crossed my mind, and that's why I had to call it fortunate that I managed to get back to the body like this. The corpse was now located in a big muddy puddle. Half the thing had already sunken into the swamp-like pool of water. I only realized afterwards, but there was an unused irrigation channel right nearby, clogged with fallen leaves and dirt, and there was rainwater flowing in from there. My shoes had been awash with water for a long time now, so without any hesitation I stepped into the puddle. Luckily, the whole muddy stream washed it all away. I couldn't leave any slight traces, like bloodstains. The rain was like a blessing from heaven. I checked around me, paying very close attention, then turned off the lantern. It became pitch black, but my eyes got used to the darkness in a few moments, and once I managed to reach the street light on the other side, I was able to make out even faint lights. I stuck the shovel into the puddle right next to the corpse. The ground was even looser here than I thought, and the shovel's tip easily slid inside it. I had to hurry and dig. If I took too much time, I might lose my energy and strength again. It felt almost like digging a hole in the sand at the beach. It was easy to dig, but no matter what, the muddy water kept flowing in, covering the hole. The digging wasn't going as well as I'd hoped. I dug, and the water would go in, so I couldn't get a sense of how deep it was. The only way for me to measure it was to bury my own foot in the mud. I'm digging just fine. It's all right. Don't be disheartened. Dig, dig, dig. Occasionally a car would come by on the road, and I'd hurry to hide myself in the trees. Everyone was only passing through. They wouldn't have their eyes peeled in this kind of darkness. I understood it logically, but I still couldn't help but hide. What I was really scared of wasn't quite that one of those cars would coincidentally happen to witness me here. It was that the distance I could spot cars from was getting gradually shorter. At first, I noticed the splashing sounds from really far away as cars drove through them. I started noticing them less and less, and with the car that just passed by, I didn't notice it until its headlights were upon me. I felt my senses growing duller by the second. someone were to take a peek in secret as I was burying the body at the worst possible time, maybe I wouldn't even notice. The moment I thought that, I took a good look all around me. I roused all my half-asleep senses and searched for signs of presence nearby. What if I found out someone was spying on me from the trees? A carnivorous feeling snarled at me, glaring. If there was, then I would dig another hole. I'd come this far already. In order to achieve perfection, I didn't care how much more I had to pay. I didn't know what kind of fate I was making at the time, but it was definitely a fervently glaring one. My 5 senses reached the conclusion that nobody was present. I didn't breathe a sigh of relief. How long had I been digging this mud out of here? It was deep enough for it to go up to my knees. Maybe this was enough. Maybe I'd throw the corpse in as a test. I swallowed, getting my breathing under control. Despite how much I'd beaten him, I was afraid of touching the corpse, so instead I dragged it by the feet to the hole. It took more than just a waggle and a tug to do it, but of course it did, considering this man's weight was easily 80 kilograms. I rallied all my strength and dragged him. At this point, my groundless fears that he might suddenly start moving again had vanished long ago. His body fit perfectly into the muddy hole. It was more than deep enough. All right, let's bury him. Quickly, quickly, quickly. If I did a perfect job of burying it here, everything would be over. I would hide it in the hole, and none of this would have ever happened. When I realized I only had a little farther to go to finish everything, I was racked with pointless anxiety, like I was in a race against time. It was like I was absorbed in a delusion, that if I didn't bury the body quickly, it might come back to life. In any case, in a great rush, I poured mud and dirt into the hole. If I didn't work efficiently, someone might find me here. Until now, I figured if someone saw, I'd just kill them. But not anymore. I was arrested with such absolute fear that if someone saw me, it would be all over. As I finished the work off, it was a total mess. Splish, splish, squish, squish. I drew the surface of the shovel across the ground, trying to make it flat. I was completely covered in mud at that point. The rain washed the mud off my body, but not off my now blackened clothing. My body and mind were caked with panic, with fear, with rain and sweat and mud. My shoulders heaving, I threw down the shovel and sat down in the mud. I was so exhausted that I wanted to lie down right here and sleep. It was over. This time. For real. It was over. The man was now in the bottom of the wet dirt. Right this moment, there were traces that this place had been dug up, but the rain and flowing muddy water would completely cover it all within moments. Yes, it was over. I did it! I did it! I did it, you motherfucker! And then I fell over backwards, face up in the mud. Raindrops pelted my face without mercy, but I didn't care. After staying there for a while, resting my mind, I got up again. It was over. So let's go home. You already buried the whole thing. So now it's like it's never happened. It never happened, so there's no reason for me to stay out here and get rained on. I wobbled to my feet. I wouldn't use the shovel anymore. I considered disassembling it, but I didn't have the strength in my absolute exhaustion. I didn't really need to take it apart anyway. Dragging the shovel behind me, I headed towards the light. I stood up on my bike. It had been laying in the grass by the road. I didn't know how I was going to get the still assembled shovel into the front basket. I put the shovel down the back of my shirt like I'd done with the baseball bat. Unlike the bat, the corner of it was on my back, making it very painful. Plus, if I relaxed my posture even a little, it would fall out behind me. I ended up having to carry the shovel in my left hand and ride my bike using only my right hand. Not only was I in a state of total exhaustion, this is a downpour. One hand on the handlebars. I was swaying to and fro like a drunk. But I didn't care. Even swaying like this, I got a little closer to home every time I pedaled. I saw 2 lights swaying slowly in front of me. A car was approaching. Oh no, I need to get out of the way. From far away in the shadows of the darkness, a car appeared. Its dazzling lights washed over me. The driver made a short honk of the horn to inform me I was in the middle of the road. I have to get out of the way. I kept telling myself that, but not only was I riding one-handed, I was exhausted, so I couldn't do anything. Wobble, 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 wobble. I meandered about, not going to the right or to the left, The driver decided to swerve out of the way right in front of me, and without lowering its speed much, steadily came towards me. Its outline grew larger in my vision, and telling myself that I really needed to get out of the way, I jerked the handlebars in one direction, then lost my balance and fell over, bike and all. My whole body splayed out, and one foot got caught in the bike. This was seriously bad. My drowsiness quickly vanished, and just as a cold sweat broke out on my skin, the driver recklessly spun the wheel to the left, made a counterclockwise U-turn, and came right up to me and then stopped. The driver's seat door opened, and the driver came out. "You idiot, what are you doing here?" I was pretty sure someone would yell at me like that. Oh my. Look who it is. It was a woman's voice, and one I knew. I lifted my face off the ground and looked at her. Takano-san. Good evening. The moon is very pretty tonight. Maibara-kun. It was raining far too hard to see the moon. Takano-san unfolded an umbrella and smiled as she spoke. That smile was, for some reason, uncanny, like she'd seen right through me. Out of all the people I could have met, like the sudden feeling that this was the one I wanted to see the least. What are you doing out so late? And you're soaked and covered in mud, and no umbrella either. What is that? A shovel? She'd come here via car. She wouldn't have known what I was just doing. And yet she smiled, as though she knew everything. Calm down, Keiichi Maibara. She always makes that mysterious-looking smile, remember? Don't let her onto anything, lest you dig your own grave. The rumors say you were playing baseball with a golf club. Is that what the shovel's for, too? You're using it as an umbrella? I should tell a good lie here. If I could just do that, things would work out. When I went with Rena to go digging for treasure at the dam, we forgot this there. And you went to get it in this downpour? When I left my house, I didn't think it would rain, so... Oh, it's been raining for a while, though. You've been out for quite some time, haven't you? Well, yes, I was kind of wandering around. Even so. You came from that direction, didn't you? The dam is in the opposite direction, you know. Takano-san was clearly aware that something exceedingly abnormal was happening with me. And as she played her little word games, she was enjoying driving me into a corner. Maybe she had a vague guess just from the situation of what I'd been doing. My timing really sucked, to run into her of all people, of all the times. At the very end, I could only be frustrated at my terrible luck. I'd done so much, and the end was literally right around the corner. So why at the very, very end did I run into her of all people? What do you do, Keiichi Maibara? You're still holding something that could be a dangerous weapon. Will you silence Takano-san? Even if it would be simple to kill Takano-san, dealing with the car she'd come in afterward would be an issue. I couldn't drive a car. It was completely different from a motorbike. But even if the car was here, as long as there was no proof I killed her, yes, in tonight's downpour without any prior planning, all by coincidence, a hit and run. As long as I didn't drop any handkerchiefs with my initials on them, they would never know I killed her. A black flame quietly smoldered and raged in the core of my body. That's a scary look. Did I tease you too much? Takano-san started to laugh by herself, then thankfully stopped talking about it. But the dark clouds in my mind didn't go away. Leaving that aside, how long are you planning on crawling on the ground with your bike like that? Do you mind moving out of the way? If I moved, she would leave, so I tried to get the bicycle up and out of the way, but then twisted my ankle in it and fell over. Shit! There was a sharp pain in the ankle I'd twisted. This is nonsense. A sprained ankle? Now? Oh my. Are you alright? Did you twist your ankle? Takano-san squats down and takes a good look at the ankle I keep rubbing. She compares it to my facial expression, apparently trying to gauge how bad the wound was. Can you stand? I didn't expect to, but I couldn't even stand up. It was all I could do to shamelessly wriggle on the ground like a caterpillar. Takano-san looked at her watch, then at her car, and after thinking for a moment, opened the passenger seat door, and then gave me her shoulder to stand up with. I'll take you home. I do feel bad, since it's almost like I hit you. I'm sorry. I wouldn't just leave you there. It's a good thing I'm a nice person. Nobody good has ever called themselves a nice person. But that would have been a terrible thing to say to someone holding me up like this. I took Takano's hands and sat down in the passenger seat. Takano-san went around the back and looked at my bike on the ground. I don't suppose we could take the bicycle home tomorrow? I could clearly tell from her face that she thought it would be a pain since it would be heavy and it would get her car dirty. But my bike has the name Maebara written on it. I couldn't leave it out here like this. Well, can you somehow put it in the car? I sort of need it. The trunk is already full. If I put it in the back seat, it'll get the seats dirty with mud. Well, given how you're already in here, it's already dirty, I suppose. I turn back to the back seat and see someone's folding bicycle there already. It still looked big enough to fit my bike in there as well. My expression reflected my thoughts, and the exact thought seemed to get through to her. Alright. I'll put it in here for you. I'll be really nice, but just for tonight, okay? Takano-san continued with her mean jokes. You don't trust her at all? I don't remember you actually mentioning anything like that. But she hoisted my bike and loaded it into the back seat for me. The mean jokes were one thing, but couldn't she do something about that eerie smile of hers? And even more importantly than the bike, I didn't want to leave the shovel here. The shovel could be directly connected to the buried body, and to me. Sorry to ask another favor, but could you get my shovel too? Takano-san gave me a clearly dubious expression. Your shovel? That's fine with me. Is it important? The more I talk, the worse it gets for me. That's how I felt, so I didn't force myself to answer her. Eventually, outlasted by my silence, Takano-san gave a short shrug and sighed. She probably has Tomitake's corpse in her trunk. Interesting. It's possible. It's about that time that he would be dead, and she's soon to go missing, presumably, assuming things go like the other arcs. It's a possibility. Alright, I understand. You think you mentioned not trusting her in the last chapter when they were in the ritual shed? Oh yeah, I think I do remember that actually. Alright, I understand. You need your shovel, right? You don't need to make such a mean face. Takano-san brought over the shovel that was lying in the middle of the road. I clutched it like I'd never let go of it again. Takano-san watched me with a puzzled look. Okay, let's be off. Maebara-kun, you live at the Maebara Mansion, don't you? Why does everyone call my house the Maebara Mansion? Because it's actually a mansion. It must be nice to be rich. As she spoke, Takano-san pulled the handbrake and stepped on the gas. That's not how you spell the word brake. Anyway. Not this instance, anyway. After making a skillful U-turn using the shoulder of the road, she steadily increased in speed. From the rearview mirror, that accursed place seemed to melt into the darkness. Read? Huh? I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you. What was that? Takano-san suddenly tried to say something to me, but thoughtlessly I didn't catch it. Looking ahead, Takano-san said the same thing one more time. The body. How well was it buried? I thought my heart might beat out of my chest, but I didn't let it show. She broke the brain. But my lungs were squeezed tight and I couldn't breathe. What are you talking about? When burying bodies in mountains like these, you have to bury it fairly deep because wild dogs will often smell the corpse and dig it out. Some human bone a wild dog brings back in its mouth leads to an incident being uncovered. The police head out to a stretch of mountains. It actually happens pretty often, you know. Pound, pound, clang, clang. Huge rusted bells started ringing in my head. Had I buried it so deep that I could say it absolutely wouldn't be found? The answer was no. I was in such a rush to bury him and get it over with that I couldn't deny having possibly buried it too close to the surface. No, wait. That's not... Wait, anyway. This woman, how does she know? She had just passed by here in her car by coincidence. And we ran into each other by coincidence. If she'd been watching the entire thing from the trees, and once I left, she came back in her car? It didn't make logical sense. So then, why? Keiichi Maebara, that's it. You need to kill her. My entire body reawakened, and I could feel my pupils dilate. I couldn't possibly beat her to death with a shovel in such a small car. Then I would use my hands and strangle her. But she was driving right now. If I strangled her, we might get into an accident. Then suddenly, Takano-san turned and looked at me. What, no witty retort? For a moment I was surprised. What was she talking about? It would seem we're not a very good match. Takano-san said, disappointed, returning her gaze ahead. I repeated the words she said a few times in my head, and finally realized she'd meant it as an off-color joke. I didn't know whether it was really a joke, but I wouldn't be able to fool her no matter how many lies I told. Right now, with her driving the car like this, I couldn't kill her. I would have an even harder time doing it when we got back to my house. That moment we met, that had been my best chance. And to have missed it so easily, it hurt. After that, Takano-san didn't say a single word. The car was completely buried in an almost suffocating silence. What kind of woman had I run into? With everything that happened today, I managed to pull it off. And at the very end of it all, I just had to go home and go back to sleep. What bad luck. As my sleepiness gradually took over me, the anxiety I felt steadily started to matter less and less. Is this alright, Keiichi Maebara? You probably should not leave this woman alive. Right now, I'm tired. She stepped on the brakes, and I jerked against my seatbelt. That woke me up. I thought I must have fallen asleep by accident. I looked out the window, and there was a big building with faint lights on. It was really dark out, but I knew immediately it was my house. I'll go get your folks for you. Would you mind the place for a few moments while I'm gone? Don't make fun of me, please. Besides, look, I'm fine now. I can walk by myself. Oh my, you were in such pain before that you had to get me to carry you. Did you just want a pretty lady to be nice to you? As Takano-san spoke, she left the car and opened up her umbrella. The sound of falling raindrops was fierce, as always. I carefully reached down and rubbed the ankle I'd twisted. There was still some pain and a little weirdness, but they weren't that bad anymore. Rather than being happy about how light the wound was, I first regretted this whole thing. If I hadn't twisted my ankle, I could have still taken the option of killing Takano-san right then and there. There probably wasn't much doubt that Takano-san was convinced I was involved in some sort of crime. If she knew about everything happening with Satoko, then she might have even guessed I killed somebody. Click. Takano-san opened the passenger side door for me. You sure you don't need my shoulders? I wouldn't mind doing it for you again. I ignored her and answered by getting out of the car by myself. The rain was still pretty intense. I got my bicycle out of the back seat. I was a bit curious who the other bike belonged to, but that didn't matter right now. I let Takano-san hold the umbrella over me, then pushed my bicycle up to the front door. Thank you very much. I'll be fine now. My ankle hurt so much earlier, And it still did, but it aggravated me that it hadn't even been that bad. It was really, seriously terrible luck.
じゃ
Alright,
あ私は
I'll
こ
be
れで
leaving
失礼
then.
するわね。前原
Keep
君
it
と
a
二人
secret
きりで
that
夜
we
の
had
ド
a
ライ
nice
ブだ
evening
ったら
drive together by ourselves, okay?
みんなに
Especially from
特に二郎さんには
Jiro-san. Jiro-san? Oh, she meant Tomitake-san. I suppose she calls him by his first name. His full name must be Jiro Tomitake then. And then the other bike, the folding one in the back seat that I didn't care about at first, suddenly came to mind. Hey, excuse me, you're from Hinamizawa, right? On the day before yesterday, as I walked near the dam, half asleep, Tomitake-san had talked to me. And the bicycle he'd been riding, it was... That bicycle in the back belongs to Tomitake-san, doesn't it? Takano-san's eyes. I think they sharpened for a moment.
どうしてそう思う
And
の
why do you think that?
以前に会った
I
時
saw it
に
when I
見
met
て
him
ました
before.
フレームも
The
特徴
frame
的
stood
で
out
した
to
し
me. Oops.
ふーん
Hmm.
でも
But
おかしくないか
wouldn't
し
that be
ら
odd?
この自転
Do you
車
think
が
it's
ジローさ
possible
ん
for
の
this to be
ものじゃな
Jiro-san's
かった
bike?
と
おかしいって
Odd. Huh?
え
Takano-san, her hair elegantly fluttering, peers into my eyes.
だって
Well,
ひなみざわに
there
は
are no
民
bed
宿
and
なんて
breakfasts in
ないの
Hinamizawa, are there?
ならジロー
Jiro-san
さん
would
は
need to be
街
staying in
に泊まっ
town.
ていることになるわよね
そうなんで
Is
すか
that so?
まあ
Well, I guess that's
そう
right,
なら
huh?
そうなんじゃないですか
街から
You
ひな
can't
みざ
really
わ
walk
ま
from
では
town to Hinamizawa,
とても
can you?
歩いてなんか行き来できないわよねバスだって
And there
走
are
って
no
ないし
buses either.
せめて自
You at
転
least
車
need a
くらい
bicycle.
はなきゃね
She didn't need to tell me that. That's why Jiro-san was riding a bike.
そのジロ
For
ーさんの
Jiro-san's
自転車が
bicycle to be
私
stowed
の
in my
車に
car,
積んであってジローさ
and him
んが
not in
私の
there,
車に乗って
that
い
would
な
be
い
strange,
な
wouldn't
ら
it?
ジローさん
It
は
would mean
ひなみざ
Jiro-san
わ
was
で
in
自転車
Hinamizawa
なし
without a
って
bike.
ことになっちゃうわよジローさ
I'd
んを
have to have
放っ
left
ておいて
Jiro-san somewhere and put his bike in
自
the car,
転車
wouldn't
だ
I?
けが私の車に積んであるなんてありえない
It
でし
wouldn't
ょ
make sense. As she spoke, Takano-san made eyes like a hawk. Unfortunately, I didn't really understand what was so odd.
それの
What about that is odd?
高野さんは
Aren't you and Tomitake-san
仲
friends?
がいいんですよね何かのようで
I don't really think it would be
自転
so
車を積んであげ
strange for there to be some reason you
た
had his
別におかしい
bicycle in your
ことだ
car.
とは思わないです
Now you're convinced she has his corpse in the trunk?
そうじゃないで
But
し
it
ょ
would be.
つまり
What I mean
こ
is,
のひなみざわにおいて
Jiro-san and his bicycle
ジロー
being in
さんと
different
その自
places in
転車が
Hinamizawa
バラバ
wouldn't
ラに
make
存
sense.
在することはありえないということなのよ以上の理由
And for
から
those reasons, it means
この
this
自転車
bicycle
がジロ
can't
ー
be
さんの
his.
ものであるわけがない理解で
Do
き
you
たかしら
understand now? Takano-san's roundabout way of talking was hard to comprehend, but that eeriness I could feel, that vague dreadfulness, I didn't like it at all. But the most wild, instinctive part of me warned me not to pry.
あれは私
That's
の
my
自転車
bicycle.
なのよジローさんに
Jiro-san
選んでも
picked it
ら
out
った
for me
から
though, so I
センス
can't
が
deny
似て
that
る
it
のは
looks
間
alike.
違いないけれどね
あ
Ah,
そうだっ
I
たん
see
ですか
now.
どうりで見て
I thought it looked similar.
私とあなたは
You and I
今
never saw
夜
each
出会わ
other
なかっ
tonight.
た
And now she was talking about something completely different.
何を言って
What
る
are you
んですか
talking about?
私とあ
You
な
and
た
I
は
never saw each other tonight.
出会わなかった
I stayed there, not knowing what to say, and Takano-san repeated her eerie, succinct phrase to me again.
私とあな
You and I never met this night.
私と
You and
あな
I
出会わなかっ
never saw each other tonight. Something cold and unpleasant crawled up my spine. I knew, because I'd killed a person with my own hands before. Before, I came to the conclusion that I only had one chance to beat this woman to death to keep her quiet, and I couldn't hesitate. So I could tell that she'd arrived at the very same conclusion. My instincts warned me again. I wish I'd never met this woman. The faint sense, like a rotten smell, drifting from this woman, was no doubt the exact same sense that I was giving off right now. The very peculiar aspiration, the lack of uncertainty at taking a human's life for a purpose, one that only those who have risen above everything had. Actually, maybe I should have called it a nausea. It meant, and I didn't know how to explain this very well, but Takano-san was the same as me. She knows Keiichi killed someone. She's just chill about it because she killed someone as well. That would make sense. In other words, someone who shouldn't have been here. Someone I couldn't have let anybody know was here. Someone who nobody would have wanted to see. And now that we had, we could calmly pretend as though we never met. Yes. Which meant that just like I wanted to have nothing else to do with her, she didn't want anything to do with me either. And she too wanted to make it so that we'd never met. Both of us wished for the same thing. Our desires were the same, which meant Takano-san's suggestion was extremely practical, and that I couldn't outright refuse.
それでいいなら
If that's fine with you, then sure, whatever.
俺と
You and I didn't meet this night.
今夜出会わなかった。
そうよね。
You're right.
あなたにとっても
That
そ
would
の
be
方が
best for
いい
you
でしょ
too, wouldn't it?
どうしてそう
Why do you think that?
いちいち
Are you seriously asking me that?
それくらい自
You
分で
can't figure that out on your own, boy?
坊や
She cut me off with the condescending word boy, right in front of my house, in a place most unsuited to killing. And yet, there was a frozen thirst for blood coming from both of us. I would be killed right here, right now. Yeah. Then I definitely should have definitely beaten her as we passed each other. A damp, greasy sweat broke out on my body. That's fine. If you want me, then you can come any time. And when I made up my mind, she shook her hair elegantly and turned on her heel. Oh, well, that's another screenshot for Josh. Jesus, Higurashi has more of this than Harry Potter so far.
よかったわね
Good.
私が優しい
I'm a kind person, after all. What was good? How? Because she was a kind person? Was that it? I didn't get it. Takano-san got into her car. We didn't exchange any words of parting. I had performed a massive feat, the killing of Satoko's uncle, and yet I didn't feel any accomplishment. On the holy night of Oyashiro-sama's curse, on which the taking of another's life was allowed. On the terribly rainy night when the demons wandered, as agents of Oyashiro-sama's will. The demons were never supposed to meet, but suddenly they did. The demons parted ways triumphantly. There was no reason for them to fight. Both their objectives had already been accomplished. With the rain hitting me like a waterfall, my eyes met with Takano-san's through the car window. The female demon, her mouth twisted into a distorted, fearless smile. It was too late to kill her. Far too late. That very first moment we saw each other, had been my best chance. And now that we had parted like this, I was acutely aware of it. I should not have let her live. She beeped her horn quickly, then her car drove away into the deluge. The one woman who knew what really happened tonight disappeared into the dark. As long as she was alive, this night would never really end. Just get into an accident, I thought to myself. In this downpour, slip on some mud or something and fly face first into a tree and die. That wasn't a delusion, a wild flight of fantasy. It was an earnest wish. Yes, it was a command. Die! Die! And keep your mouth shut for eternity! Because I have no doubt you're wishing for me to die all the same. My curse upon her faded emptily as Takano-san's taillights disappeared into the utter darkness. Her car's lights were completely out of sight now. Even the sound of the engine faded into the sound of the heavy rain and was inaudible now. I too turned on my heel. Fucking hell! Jesus Christ, that's like 6. To draw the curtains on this insane night. To open my front door and end it all. I began walking towards the front door. I was covered in mud, and I made a squishing sound with every step I took. 6 total across the game, I think. Because there was 1 in Onikakushi, 3 in Watanagashi, and then 2 here. Squish, squish, Don't worry, Keiichi Maebara. Squish. Squish. She'll die. Squish. Squish. Her end will be as miserable as she is. I'll throw her into some flames alive and let her dance until she's burned to a crisp. I'll burn her to ashes in the fires of hell itself until she's roasted as much as she deserves. I wish. I really do. Squish. Huh? Just now, I hadn't taken a step, and yet, a footstep. Without emotion, I turned around. If there was a footstep that wasn't my own, then it was obvious someone else was behind me. Was there somebody else there? I was sick of this. Whoever it was, I was sick of everything tonight. This time I would kill them. I'd kill them without a second thought. I wouldn't hesitate to turn around and dig another hole. But fortunately, there was nobody there. I wasn't going to have to kill any more people tonight. This night, I couldn't handle any more of it. Even if I heard an extra footstep each time I stopped, I put it down to me just being tired. Watch out, Keiichi, your wish might become true. New tips unlocked. Fire from Hell and Victim of the 5th Year. And achievement unlocked. Taking extra steps. Let's view the new tips. Fire from Hell. Hello, do you need the hospital or the fire department? The fire department. Is there a fire or some other accident? Please speak slowly and calmly. I think it's a fire. This is the rest area on the highway. I can see a ton of fire and smoke coming up from the mountains behind us. Nobody goes back there, so I don't know why anything got lit on fire. Anyway, I figured I should let you know. It could turn into a forest fire. I understand. I need to know exactly where you are, so please tell me your name, a phone number we can use to get in touch with you, and the exact location of the fire.
Notice from the fire department headquarters, we have a report of a suspicious fire on the western slopes of the mountain. Given its distance from the road, it could be a couple's bonfire or someone unlawfully burning trash. The location is deep in the woods. No homes in the area, but the fire could spread. Immediately go to the site to verify.
Is this the fire station? This is the district fire department branch. We arrived moments ago at the reported area. Fire confirmed to be a burning oil drum left in the mountains. The fire is calming and there is no chance it will spread. And, well...
I think it's something to do with the streaming software. I didn't realize my cursor was actually visible, though. Oops. That must be really annoying. Give me a second. I'm actually going to disable my cursor. It's just something to do with the way it's being streamed, yeah. Hang on. Capture cursor, turn that off.
And, well, in the oil drum, I think it might be a person. Like, a person burned with kerosene or something. Well, I think maybe we should get the police over here. There's no mistaking it! This is a person!
Victim of the 5th year. This year's curse, then. That's what it looks like. He kills them differently every year, but this is particularly conspicuous, isn't it? Clawing out your own throat. That isn't normal. Let's leave the rest to the old man in forensics. I'm sure he'll find some suspicious drugs. Thank you! Thank you for your hard work! Oishi-san! Komiyama-san and the others have arrived! Oishi-san, much appreciated. Well, it would seem we have a pretty crazy one this year.
Yes, we've been outsmarted. I was absolutely under the impression Teppei Hojo would get killed tonight. Who is the deceased? Jiro Tomitake, a photographer with a hobby for coming to Hinamizawa a few times a year. We didn't even have him marked. I wonder what happened. Did they realize we were watching the Hojo residence the whole time and decide to switch their target? Maybe. We sure flubbed this one. And there are no problems with Teppei Hojo? Correct. His daughter left for the festival in the evening, and a little while later, he left on his motorbike. His daughter came back first. Wait, has he not come back yet? Is he still out drinking somewhere? Oji-san, are you there? Call from Chief Takasugi. He's on the line in car 1. Well, that's all for today. Next time, we will see what the fallout of our little murder stint will get us. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you then. Goodbye.